Chapter 410. Somewhere in the ocean of Green Cliff Planet, the ocean measured about 30,000 miles long and 14,000 miles wide. It was the largest ocean on Green Cliff Planet. The foundation of Yuanhua sect was located on Green Cliff Mountain. On this ocean, there were only tens of small islands, planted with some spirit herbs that needed a large amount of water vapor to grow. In the shallow waters near the islands, a large number of underwater breeding grounds were built with restrictive spells, where many pearl mussels were bred. Some of them had lived for several thousand years, and the pearls they produced were excellent materials for crafting all kinds of magical treasures. In the depths of this ocean, hidden in the canyons at the bottom of the ocean were several dozens of energy stone veins. However, these energy stone veins were the last strategic storage of Yuanhua sect, and would never be exploited unless it was absolutely necessary. Every few years, Yuanhua sect's immortals would come here to inspect the condition of the energy stone veins. 3 years ago, Taoist Qi personally came to investigate. After being nourished by several hundred periods of natural energy, supreme-grade energy stones had already been produced in these energy stone veins. Because of the lack of exploitation, the natural environment of this ocean had been preserved very well. It was especially so for an archipelago located at the southeast corner of the ocean. Thousands of islands of different sizes stretched across the ocean, each of them extremely beautiful, and filled with abundant natural energy. It felt like spring all year round, making it an excellent choice to build a cave abode. A sword beam streaked across the sky. Wu Qi was sitting lazily on it, glancing around at the small islands on the ocean. He was looking for an island with the best scenery and the richest natural energy, where he could build a cave abode that belonged to him and Princess Xianglu, as well as Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon. Off in the distance, a colorful cloud was seen flying up and down in all directions, leaping and landing on the island like fleas. It was Princess Xianglu riding on the cloud, playing with Peppermint and Angelica on the island. Princess Xianglu was also shouldering the heavy responsibility of finding a suitable island. However, after taking a stroll around the island with Peppermint and Angelica, she was immediately attracted by the beautiful scenery, as well as the strange products that were very different from those found on the mainland. Therefore, she simply brought the 2 little girls and started running around. From afar, he could hear the laughter of Princess Xianglu, Peppermint, and Angelica. Wu Qi suddenly realized that Princess Xianglu was still a young girl who knew nothing about the world. Even if she had inherited the bloodline of the primal god race from an unknown ancestor, she was still a young girl at heart. A shrill howl came from a distance away. A whale, which had a single horn on its head and already had the power of a flood dragon, leaped up from the water. Behind its body, 3 gigantic bloody mouths suddenly darted out of the water and closed on the back of the whale. Its sharp teeth let out a loud creaking noise, nearly swallowing a half of the whale's body. Terrified, the whale fled deeper into the ocean, while Catfish Flood Dragon, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn followed closely behind him, looking as if they would not stop until they devoured him. After following Wu Qi for over a year, Catfish, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn had obtained too many benefits. Especially after they had eaten more than half of Reverend Yun's body, the enormous immortal energy and blood essence had given them a great boost to their overall strength. Catfish Flood Dragon had successfully broken through the realm of nascent divinity, and the extra immortal energy and blood essence had made her body expand to 5,000 feet long, turning her into a behemoth. The 3 greedy fellows had been harming the sentient creatures in the ocean for a long time. Meanwhile, Lord Xiansheng was hovering several hundred miles away on the surface of the ocean, holding the seal of Dragon King of Longyuan River in his hand and exercising the demon-gathering technique unique to the Dragon King's bloodline, summoning all the aquatic demons in this ocean. Green Cliff Planet was an important place for Yuanhua sect. Every 100 years, the disciples of Yuanhua sect would carry out a bloody purge against all the aquatic demons in this ocean, wiping out all the aquatic demons that might pose a threat to Yuanhua sect. Therefore, Lord Xiansheng had spent a great deal of effort to gather only a few hundred prawn and crab soldiers on the surface of the ocean. Most of them were still in the realm of drawing energy into their bodies, and had barely gained some intellect. They could not be considered to possess any divine abilities or magical power. In Wu Qi's eyes, These prawn and crab soldiers were just some seafood. They could be caught and used to make a good stew, but it would take him several hundred years to expect them to do something. However, Lord Xiansheng was used to being a demon king on Myriad Immortals planet, and since Wu Qi was going to build an immortal abode on a vast ocean, he had the thought of showing off his power as a demon king. So, naturally, he had to gather some subordinates. Even though these little demons of the level of seafood could only serve as guards of honor, at least they would look impressive. Sitting on the sword beam, Wu Qi kept a close watch on Princess Zhang and the few others with his divine will as he yawned lazily. When he killed Taoist White Sparrow, he used the black water thunder suppressing art to unleash a violent thunderbolt that nearly collapsed Qingcang Peak, which made Patriarch Yuanhua realize that there was a great flaw in Yuanhua Sect's defense system. Under Wu Qi's suggestion, Yuanhua Sect dispatched several hundred elite nascent soul and nascent divinity disciples to build immortal abodes all over Green Cliff Planet. At the same time, they also built an early warning system. Once someone sneaked into Green Cliff Planet, they would immediately send a warning to Green Cliff Mountain. Wu Qi volunteered to build an immortal abode that belonged to him and Princess Zhang on this vast ocean. It was Wu Qi's intention. After all, he had too many things that he could not show to others, and it was necessary for him to build an independent abode far away from Green Cliff Mountain. If not for this idea, he could have just left after killing Taoist White Sparrow that night, and there was no need for him to throw a heavenly thunderbolt at Qingcang Peak. But now, everything was going according to his plan. With an immortal abode built on Green Cliff Planet and Yuanhua Sect as the foundation, Wu Qi would be able to develop his overall strength and power boldly. Wu Qi nodded thoughtfully as he looked at the seafood that was chattering beside Lord Xiansheng. There was a formation in Scroll of Stealing called Demon Spirit Star Gathering Formation, a formation that specialized in gathering the essence of the stars and the moon and giving birth to demons. Perhaps, he could construct such a formation here and give birth to a batch of water demons and ocean monsters. While he was deep in thought, Wu Qi's divine will swept across a small island that looked like a screen, standing over 5,000 feet above the surface of the ocean. The island measured about 30 miles from east to west, and less than 2 miles from north to south. Right in the center of the island was a screen-shaped mountain that occupied 70% of the island's surface area. Both the north and south sides of the mountain were steep as if they had been cut by a knife, and the rocks were as fine as jade. Natural energy could be seen filling the gaps between the rocks. A thin layer of palm-thick green moss could be seen clinging to the rocks, while several thousand trees of different sizes could be seen growing sparsely on the rocks, decorating the mountain like an exquisite bonsai. There was a circle of 36 small coral reefs within 100 miles of the island. With a slight adjustment to the position of these islands, Wu Qi could construct a Big Dipper killing formation, which was listed as an immortal grade formation in Scroll of Stealing. Underneath the island was a place where water and fire intermingled. An underground volcano was suppressed by a water element energy vein at the bottom of the ocean. As the water and fire clashed, an endless life force was brewing underneath the island. The shoals near the island were very rich, and countless pearl mussels and other mussels could be seen lying on the shoal. All these proved that the island was full of natural energy and life force, and that was the reason why such a strange scene could be seen. Wu Qi exercised the mystic eyes of universe. The volcano under the island measured tens of miles in circumference, and contained a tremendous heat. Surprisingly, the water element energy vein that suppressed the volcano stretched for several tens of thousands of miles, all the way to the main peak of Green Cliff Mountain. This energy vein is one of the main energy veins of this ocean. Wu Qi's eyes lit up, and he happily chose this island. If not because his divine will was different from ordinary immortals, which allowed him to fuse it with his surroundings and discover some traces that were hard to detect, he would not be able to find this underground energy vein that was concealed by the volcano's aura. Presumably, it was because of this volcano that the cultivators of Yuanhua Sect did not discover the existence of this main energy vein. With a complacent smile on his face, Wu Qi flew towards the island and circled around the mountain a few times. This made him even more complacent. Right on the top of this screen-shaped mountain were 9 interconnected caves, each of which led to a huge underground cave that measured about 1 mile in circumference. Through Wu Qi's mystic eyes of universe, he could see that these 9 caves were emitting a faint purple glow, which made them look like human hearts that were pumping blood, emanating an endless life force. Wu Qi's heart raced. Without any hesitation, he unleashed a large number of primordial runes into the surroundings with all his might. His energies transformed into dazzling primordial runes, sprinkling down in all directions while accompanied by a deep, ancient and desolate incantation, completely enveloping the entire island. Surprisingly, a spirit cave of such caliber had escaped the detection of Yuanhua sect. This was the characteristic of an innate lower-grade immortal abode, and it was called the 9 Orifices Exquisite Acupoint. Judging from the purple mist that was being emitted by this immortal abode, after several tens of thousands of years of accumulation, the first thread of immortal energy would be produced in this underground cave. It was immortal energy, not ordinary natural energy. But, it was not surprising, as when the immortal energy was formed, it would only condense the essence of the natural energy, while the rest of the impurities would turn into a purple mist and spray out. In the eyes of ordinary immortals, this purple mist was a complete waste. How could they know that an immortal abode that could even make those high-level heaven immortals fight for it with all their might? After all, the foundation of Yunhua sect was too shallow, and they had never seen a real immortal abode. Complacently, Wu Qi sealed off the entire island, then flew into the 9 Orifices Exquisite Acupoint and threw the energy-condensing and immortal ascension ball he obtained from Tsang-Ao immortal abode into the ground. With the help of this energy-condensing and immortal ascension ball, which could condense natural energy into immortal energy, it would probably take only a few years for this immortal abode to become a real immortal abode. When everything was done, Wu Qi took out a great amount of materials he brought from Myriad Immortals' planet, and began to decorate the abode that belonged to him. Starting from the underground cave, one formation discs after another that were crafted on Myriad Immortals' planet were laid out, and a great number of formation flags and defensive items were laid out. Countless energy stones and materials needed for the formation were placed into the formation. Very carefully, Wu Qi used the greatest power he could muster to construct a series of 36 layers of nested formations in the immortal abode. The formation stretched from the underground cave to the bottom of the ocean, from the bottom of the ocean to the surface of the ocean, from the ocean to the surface of the ocean, to the sky, to every flower, grass, sand, and stone on the surface of the island. Wu Qi devoted himself wholeheartedly to the transformation of the island. Gradually, the island and the 36 coral reefs around it became hazy, and then became clear again. After that, they were once again shrouded by countless clouds and smoke, and then everything returned to normal. After repeating the process several dozens of times, the island finally returned to its original state. If anyone had been to this island before, he or she would be surprised to find that the position of the island and the coral reefs around it had undergone a subtle change. It was as if the light, time, and space in this space had been slightly twisted. But, when one took a closer look at it, everything looked the same as usual, and the island could not be any more normal. Wu Qi flew to a cave entrance on the cliff facing east, then embedded a jade plaque with the words Wu Xian Immortal Abode carved on it into a rock. Wu Xian Immortal Abode was the first footprint Wu Qi left in this world of leisure. Chapter 411. As for Lord Xiansheng, he was busy training his shrimp soldiers and crab generals. As for Catfish Flood Dragon, she would only collude with Gold Horn and Silver Horn, and neither of them was a trustworthy person. Peppermint and Angelica knelt on the ground, raising their heads obediently to look at Wu Qi. "Please tell us, Master," they said at the same time. Nodding satisfactorily, Wu Qi said with a smile, "In a few days, Master will leave Green Cliff Planet for a period of time. Gold Horn and Silver Horn will stay here to protect Zixian. You two will have to keep an eye on these two brothers, and don't let them cause too much trouble." A few wisps of silver gleam flickered in Princess Zhongli's eyes, and her voice became unpredictable. "If you don't come back within 100 years, I'll go out and look for you. There is a blessing hidden in the ominous, and a fatal disaster lurks in the blessing. But, there are also a few very strong purple energies that cover your future, so Zixian has no idea what you will encounter." Upon sensing Wu Qi's arrival, Princess Zhongli slowly opened her eyes. Surprisingly, her pupils were a magnificent silver-purple color, with countless stars flashing and blinking in them. She looked at Wu Qi and said in a low voice, "I saw you are going to leave Green Cliff Planet to look for something very important." Only Lord Xiansheng was sitting cross-legged on the surface of the ocean. The seawater had condensed into a lotus platform that measured dozens of feet in circumference, its petals absorbing the essence of the sun and the moon and injecting it into Lord Xiansheng's body. His muscles were wriggling in an orderly fashion, and from time to time, the roar of a tsunami could be heard coming from his body. Above his head was a tiny golden flood dragon hovering amidst a cloud, also working hard to absorb the essence of the stars and the moon. Specks of silver light kept seeping into the golden flood dragon's body, and from time to time, mysterious runes could be seen flashing on the top of its head. Using the divine sense imbuing technique, Wu Qi taught the two sisters the primary cultivation technique of Dark Yin Water Scripture. This basic cultivation technique included all the cultivation techniques and insights of the Great Tao, from guiding qi into the body all the way to the Xiantian, Jin Dan, nascent soul, nascent divinity, and the 36 tiers of heaven immortal. Perhaps, those lofty heaven immortals would not pay attention to him, an ant whose aura was only that of a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator. As for those who were below the heaven immortal realm, or even a 36th tier heaven immortal, who would Wu Qi be afraid of? Therefore, Wu Qi was going to Pangu continent to try his luck. With all kinds of treasures on him, Wu Qi was not afraid of the dangers along the way. Peppermint and Angelica, who were drenched in sweat, opened their eyes and knelt on the ground. They kowtowed to Wu Qi and said, "Disciple thanks Master for your great kindness. Master's kindness is as high as the heavens and as deep as the earth. Disciple will never be able to repay Master's kindness even if their bones are crushed." The silver moon hung high in the blue sky, and light-colored thin clouds dotted the blue dome of heaven, inlaid with a silver rim by the moonlight. Silver scales danced on the surface of the ocean, while the essence of the stars and the moon that could be seen with naked eyes sprinkled down from the sky in a hazy silver glow, quietly pouring into the ocean. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi sealed Princess Zhang Li's little mouth with his lips. After giving the two little girls some instructions, Wu Qi sent a voice transmission to Lord Xiansheng, Catfish Flood Dragon, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn. After that, he floated up into the sky and came before Princess Zhanglu, who was silently exercising her divine technique, using the mystic technique of the ancient gods to absorb the mysteries of the heaven and earth and retrieve the divine power that existed in her bloodline. Carefully controlling the input of his energy, Wu Qi used the dark yin energy he cultivated in his fake nascent soul to circulate it through the sisters' meridians. He even injected a part of his energy essence into Peppermint and Angelica's bodies, helping them open up their conception and governing meridians, clearing all the obstacles in their circulations, and bringing them into the preliminary realm of drawing energy into their bodies, allowing their cultivation bases to reach the peak stage of Xiantian realm. Wu Qi stared at Princess Zhanglu in horror. Was the bloodline of the ancient gods so magical? Did she already possess the preliminary ability of foresight? Wu Qi planned to teach them the following cultivation techniques after they became heaven immortals. After all, the profound Yin Water Scripture was of great importance. If all of its essence was injected into the souls of the two little girls, the immense comprehension of the heavenly Tao and the understanding and analysis of the profound Yin energy would definitely shatter their weak souls. It was a soup that Wu Qi found in Scroll of Stealing, a special concoction made by the ancient gods to stimulate the bloodline of their mixed blood descendants, called the Energy Gathering and Spirit Restoring Soup. It was not difficult to find the ingredients for this soup. In the past few days, Wu Qi had gathered all of them and mixed a few doses of the soup for Princess Zhanglu. The effect was pretty good, and the innate divine soul of Princess Zhanglu was growing at a tremendous pace. After a while, Wu Qi suddenly breathed out a sigh of relief and slowly loosened his hands. From the layout of the restrictive spells inside and outside of Wu Xian immortal abode to the spirit herbs he brought from Myriad Immortals planet, he had planted on the island, and many other miscellaneous things, Wu Qi had told them a lot. Peppermint and Angelica listened to them and kept them in mind, memorizing all the instructions given by Wu Qi. On the island named Jade's Spirit Island, Princess Zhanglu was sitting cross-legged on the westernmost point of the screen-shaped mountain. Her body was shrouded in a five-colored auspicious light, and her body had turned translucent. Illusions of the stars in the universe and the tides of earth flame were flashing on her skin from time to time. Next to her was a jade bowl about the size of a human head, in which there were a few drops of dark liquid from the soup. Peppermint and Angelica stuck out their tongues and nodded with a little fear. Wuqi nodded, then sat down next to Princess Zhonglu and gently put his arm around her shoulder. Of course, Peppermint and Angelica could not fully assume the responsibility of supervising Goldhorn and Silverhorn. The main authority to control them was still in the hands of Princess Zhonglu. But, there were always times when Princess Zhonglu was in a secluded cultivation or was not free, so she could only let the two little girls work a little harder. 3,000 carefully selected seafood, no, 3,000 carefully selected shrimp and crab soldiers were floating quietly on the surface of the ocean, enjoying the nourishment of the essence of the stars and the moon, which was 300 times denser than usual. There were 5-foot-long lobsters, 30-feet-long sharks, bed-sized turtles, and a few huge whales. These little demons carefully selected by Lord Xiansheng were breathing white mist from their mouths, greedily sucking in the endless cool air around them. Wuqi's plan was to directly condense the strongest and most perfect innate nascent divinity, which possessed the magical effects of yin and yang and the 5 elements, and reach the root of the great Tao of heaven and earth. Then, he would use the heaven-stealing hand to quickly advance his cultivation base and break through the realm of gold immortal in the shortest time possible, resolving the threat of the Dark Yin soul captivation spell. The Dark Yin water scripture was a scripture that could lead one straight to the first tier of gold immortal realm. If the two sisters cultivated according to the scripture, as long as their luck was not too bad, they would have the hope of becoming gold immortals sooner or later. Their innate aptitude and foundation were very good. They had the best pure water element spirit root, and it seemed that they had a good comprehension ability as well. It would not be a problem for them to cultivate to the realm of heaven immortals according to the cultivation technique taught by Wuqi. Catfish was lying on her back on the surface of the ocean, her white belly covered with thick scales, and she was burping from time to time. Half of a whale's tail was hanging from the corner of her mouth, along which blood kept dripping into the ocean. The few whales who were cultivating diligently on the surface of the ocean were staring at Catfish with fear and trepidation, their bodies twitching and shivering from time to time. Not far away from them, Goldhorn and Silverhorn were lying on top of a reef that stood over 1,000 feet above the surface of the ocean like two dead fish. The essence of sun and moon was constantly seeping into their bodies, and they were snoring in enjoyment. Cold and hot air were rushing and rushing around them, yet they managed to maintain a delicate balance, and did not cause too much influence to the surrounding temperature. When I come back, both of you will have broken through the realm of heaven immortals, he said vaguely. Yes, he was going to look for the innate yang energy. As long as he could find it, he would be able to combine it with the innate yin energy to crush 10 innate nascent souls, fuse them into one, and form an innate nascent divinity. This was the most effective technique that could form an innate nascent divinity of the highest quality according to the scroll of stealing. With a faint smile on his face, Wuqi touched the ears of the two little girls, then taught them some incantations and hand incantations in a low voice. The incantations and hand incantations could be used to control the restrictive spells in Goldhorn and Silverhorn's nascent divinity. Although it could not control their life and death, it could make the brothers feel extremely uncomfortable. As the two big fellows had just awakened their ancestral bloodline, their ferocious and wild nature had not been erased yet. If Wuqi were here, they would still restrain themselves a little. But, if Wuqi was not here, perhaps the entire Yuanhua sect would be devoured by them. Therefore, it was necessary to leave behind some means to control them. In the scroll of stealing, there were 37 places where innate yang energy could be found. Wuqi did a quick calculation of his own cultivation base. If not for the fact that he was lucky enough to find innate yin energy, he could only find 2 out of the 37 dangerous places where innate yang energy could be found. And, both of them were located on Pangu continent. Although the scroll of stealing had a way to make up for all kinds of defects in the later stages, it would take too long, easily tens of thousands of years. As Wu Qi was still under the control of the Dark Yin soul captivation, and his soul would perish in another 1,000 years or so, how could he have the mood to slack off? Of course, Wu Qi could also shatter his nascent soul and form his nascent divinity at this stage, improving his cultivation base to the realm of heaven immortal before fusing with the yin and yang energy. But, the innate nascent divinity he formed would only be a lower grade one. Although it was slightly stronger than the immortal soul of an immortal, there was a limit to its strength, and it was far less effective than fusing with the yin and yang energy when forming the nascent divinity. Princess Zhanglu had taken Peppermint and Angelica as her disciples, and Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu were engaged. Therefore, it was reasonable for the two little girls to address Wu Qi as their master. Wu Qi did not ask them to change the way they addressed him. Instead, he stroked their heads and said with a smile, "Your master is still cultivating over there. Here, I need to give you some advice." Through Wu Qi's fingers, a faint white light was carefully injected into the sisters' bodies. This was the limit of what Wu Qi could do. The bodies of the two little girls could still withstand the energy of peak stage Xiantian realm. If he forcibly formed the Jin Dan for them, their fragile bodies might explode from the enormous energy. There was a limit to pulling up seedlings to help them grow. At the easternmost part of the screen-shaped mountain, near the entrance to the Wushuan immortal abode which Wu Qi had left behind, Wu Qi had opened up a small platform near the entrance. It was about 80 feet in circumference, and a few hassocks were placed on the platform. After lighting up a pot of incense, Wu Qi sat cross-legged on one of the hassocks and pressed his palms tightly against the sisters' foreheads. Chapter 4:12. Yuhua Heavenly Realm was the core of this starry sky. Heavenly Lord Sanyu, an 18th-tier heaven immortal, was stationed here by the celestial court. The Heavenly Lord was born in a very powerful immortal sect, and had a very powerful backer. Under his command were 300 heaven immortals, nearly 10,000 nascent divinity cultivators, and countless immortal officials. Each and every one of them had a profound cultivation base and profound Taoist magic. He was the person with the true power of the celestial court, who controlled the nearly 10,000 heavenly realms surrounding Yuhua Heavenly Realm. Yuhua Immortal City was located at the center of Yuhua Heavenly Realm. Countless itinerant immortals and ordinary cultivators from the nearly 10,000 heavenly realms ruled by Yuhua Heavenly Realm frequented the market square of Yuhua Immortal City. Some of them were merchants, some were blacksmiths, some were brothels and gambling dens, and so on and so forth. There was no end to the number of people who lived there. Just like the cities built by mortals in the mortal world, this immortal city had all kinds of occupations. However, more than 50% of those who came and went in this immortal city were cultivators whose cultivation base had reached nascent soul realm, while the other 50% were mortals who worked as servants. Heavenly Lord Sanyu's immortal abode was located right at the center of Yuhua Immortal City. It was a splendid building complex of nearly 100 palaces and pavilions, measuring nearly 10 miles in both width and length. It was built with golden bricks and jade tiles, and shrouded in mist. There were only a dozen heaven immortals, several hundred nascent divinity immortal officials, and some servants who lived in this immortal abode all year round. However, in order to highlight the authority of the celestial court, the palace was extremely luxurious and magnificent. Every day, when the sun shone on the golden bricks and jade tiles, the golden glow could reach over 1,000 miles away. In contrast, there was a cluster of buildings 100 miles to the south of Yuhua Immortal City. All the palaces here were built with polished black stones. They were thick, ancient, and emanated a mysterious and barbaric aura that came from the wilderness. Almost all the palaces and pavilions had the same appearance. They were square-shaped palaces with tall doors, and ancient patterns of hunting, fishing, and herding were carved on the stones. A number of huge stone pillars of different sizes stood towering in front of the doors, each of which had a raging brazier burning on top of them. The strange green flame emitted from the brazier could also illuminate a distance of 1,000 miles, vaguely competing with the golden and jade light emanating from Heavenly Lord Sanyu's immortal abode. This palace was protected by a thick and heavy wall made of black rocks. Flagpoles, over 1,000 feet tall, stood towering on all four sides of the city gate. A huge flag, over 200 feet in both width and length, was hung on these flagpoles, fluttering in the wind, revealing a huge character of you. In the middle of the day, in a palace in the northeast of this building, on a huge jade bed, a strong young man with dark skin was hugging a petite, thin, snow-white, and beautiful girl, violently gasping for breath. Both of them had just gone through a fierce battle. Sweat slid down their skin, drenching the fine brocade covering the jade bed. After a full 15 minutes, the girl finally let out a soft snort. She pushed the young man away with one hand and slowly sat up. Then, she slowly combed her pitch-black long hair that faintly exuded a layer of strange gray aura. The young man narrowed his eyes as he recalled the fierce battle just now. Then, he placed both hands on the girl's chest and said in a low voice, "Qingying, can't you ask the great oracle to lend you a hand just once?" The girl leaned lazily against the young man, stroking his broad and thick chest with both hands as she sighed faintly and said, "Great-grandfather only has less than 20 years left to live, and there is not a member of our clan who can inherit his position as the great oracle. Now, great-grandfather is busy searching for spirit herbs to prolong his life, so how can he waste his life to perform divination on something that is not related to him?" The young man said in a low voice, "Can't I just perform divination on the location of the person who killed Heda, Hetien, and Heling?" The girl gave the young man a sidelong glance, sneered and said, "Aren't you happy that they are dead? Don't tell me that you are still thinking of avenging them." Yu Huan sneered, shook his head and said mockingly, "Avenging them? Unless they are my brothers born from the same mother as me, why would I have the mood to do that? I'm just curious, what did they do when they sneaked out of the clan, and what did they encounter that caused them to be killed by someone? All these years, they have hooked up with a nobleman. I'm just curious, what is that nobleman planning?" The girl, Qingying, frowned, shook her head and said, "Now that I think about it, it's really strange. You don't know what they have been doing all these years, but why doesn't Marquis Jian know anything about it? How much effort did he have to spend to calculate all these?" Yu Huan furrowed his brows. Suddenly, he gave Qingying a gentle smile and said, "Why don't you try asking the great oracle one more time? No matter what, you are the ghost master with the best aptitude in Qing clan, and the great oracle loves you the most. If worst comes to worst, I'll just offer the immortal fruit that can prolong my life for 10 years to the great oracle." Qingying shook her head and said in a low voice, "The people who killed Heda and the others are too far away from Yuhua Heavenly Realm. Great-grandfather is exhausted now, and his cultivation base is far from what it used to be. How can he find them? I'm afraid he will die on the spot with this divination. Now, there is no one in our clan who has enough strength to inherit the position of Great Oracle. If the position of Great Oracle of Yuhua Heavenly Realm is taken by another Great Oracle from the Directorate of Celestials, Qing Clan." Shaking her head, Qingying sighed and said, "Qing Clan has been living in Yuhua Heavenly Realm for over 300 generations. If they are replaced by someone else, Qing Clan." Yu Huan frowned. He loosened his grip and rose to his feet, then slowly put on his robe. A ruthless gleam flashed in his eyes as he said indifferently, "If that is the case, then forget it. A few days ago, my father came back from Pyuyo Heavenly Realm, and he was wounded all over his body. He has been in a bad mood lately. As I'm his only son, I have to pay him a visit." Yu Huan waved his hand and spun, walking towards the exit of the hall without giving Qingying another look. Qingying's expression flickered, then she suddenly cried out, "Wait." She stopped Yu Huan, then said in a low voice, "Huan, if you really want to find the murderer, I might be able to do it by using the mystic art of psychic connection, right? However, my cultivation base is too weak now. If I forcibly use the mystic art of psychic connection, the Yin deities will invade my fleshly body, and I'm afraid my lifespan will be reduced by half." Looking at Yu Huan with a sad expression, Qingying said in a low voice, "It doesn't matter if they are dead. Why do you want to pursue this matter?" Yu Huan spun and returned to the side of the jade bed with a faint smile on his face. He hugged Qingying intimately and said, "Qingying, please help me with the divination. I'll definitely find some spirit herbs to replenish the lifespan you've lost this time. Don't tell me you don't trust me. Qingying opened her mouth, then walked down from the jade bed without saying a word. With a point of her finger, a stream of clear spring water gushed out from the ground and quickly cleaned her body. While reciting an ancient and cryptic incantation, Qingying knelt down on the ground. Her long hair fluttered in the air. Suddenly, the hall was enveloped by a layer of grayish-white mist. An oppressive pressure rushed out from the mist, amidst which, some vague figures emerged. These figures were bone-piercingly cold. They roughly had the body shape of a human, but their facial features could not be seen. When they appeared, Qingying's body suddenly trembled. About 40% of her pitch-black long hair had turned grayish-white, and her smooth and tender skin became dry and dull, as if she had suddenly aged by a few years. Yu Huan took a few steps back in panic. Unknowingly, a jade tablet engraved with strange runes had appeared in his hand. A ball of heat rushed out from the jade tablet, helping him neutralize the cold aura that felt like it could even freeze one's soul. Abruptly, the grayish-white mist shrunk inwards, wrapping around Qingying. A shrill cry came out from her mouth. Her body was shivering, and a grayish-white flame shot out from her fingertip, transforming into a 10 feet tall grayish-white light screen in the hall. She cried out in a low voice, "This is the man, and he is related to the person who killed them. The person who killed them is too far away. With my current cultivation base, I can't find them through my divination." A miserable howl rang out, as dark blood oozed out from Qingying's 7 apertures at the same time. It was dark, foul-smelling, and sticky like paint. The scene of a teleportation formation in Yuhua Immortal City appeared on the light screen. Lights and shadows flickered above the formation, as Wu Qi strode out from it. He was clad in a green Taoist robe, with his half-length hair hanging loosely behind his back, and a hair band tied in front of his forehead. He looked neat and tidy, and did not wear any ornaments. A few idlers who were standing next to the teleportation formation came up to Wu Qi with a smile on their faces, greeting him attentively. "That green-clothed Taoist, that's him." Qingying closed her eyes, her body trembling as she cried out, If he doesn't die, both you and I will be killed by him. I saw so much blood. If he doesn't die, both you and I will be killed by him." Yu Huan's expression flickered. He stepped forward and hugged Qingying, whispering a few warm words in a low voice. After that, he pushed her away mercilessly and strode out of the hall. He pouted his lips and gave a shrill whistle. An extraordinarily handsome black leopard with a horn on its head came flying over, lying down before him obediently. Yu Huan sat on the leopard's back, then cried out in a deep voice, "Flying Leopard Army, follow me to Yuhua Immortal City." A troop of 1,000 lightly armored soldiers, all mounted on colorful leopards, came running wildly, following closely behind Yu Huan. Inside Yuhua Immortal City, Wu Qi, who had just told his master about his wish to travel the world, received the permission from Patriarch Yuanhua and many other heaven immortals in Yuanhua sect, and was even rewarded with a few spirit items, was walking out from the teleportation formation that connected Yuhua Immortal City to Pulyuo Heavenly Realm. Qingying had a marvelous technique of divination. When she learned that Wu Qi was in Yuhua Immortal City, it was even 10 minutes before Wu Qi departed from Pulyuo Heavenly Realm. Therefore, right after Wu Qi walked out from the teleportation formation of Yuhua Immortal City and was entangled by a few idlers standing outside the formation, Yu Huan, with a merciless and cold grin on his face, had already brought the Flying Leopard Army and rushed to the teleportation formation. The Flying Leopard Army is handling some business. Those who have nothing to do with it, get lost. Yu Huan let out a wild laugh, casually thrusting his spear and killing a nascent soul cultivator standing next to him. After that, he thrust his spear straight at Wu Qi. Shadows of the spear flickered, and half of the square where the teleportation formation was located was enveloped by the strong wind brought up by the spearhead. Yu Huan thrust the spearhead straight at the root of Wu Qi's thigh. Chapter 413. In the face of Wu Qi's divine force, the strength of these armored soldiers was like a mayfly trying to shake an iron tree. They could do nothing to him. Effortlessly, he leaped forward and came before Yu Hehuan, grabbing his neck with one hand. Putting his slightly altered face before Yu Hehuan's face, Wu Qi grinned hideously and said, "3 of your brothers are dead. Are you going to die together with them?" Instinctively, Wu Qi reacted. With a slight twist of his left wrist, 36 scale-shaped golden beams shot out, transforming into a diamond-shaped shield that shielded before his thigh. Yu Hehuan's spear produced a long cry as it smashed forcefully onto the shield. A tremendous rebounding force came from the shield. Yu Hehuan's muscles bulged, and a tremendous force passed through the spear and collided with the rebounding force. The silver spear, engraved with the pattern of Qilin treading on clouds, was bent into the shape of a crescent moon. Being pressed by 2 tremendous forces, the spear let out a continuous dragon roar and kept trembling. On the other hand, each of the soldiers of Flying Leopard Army was stronger than the leopards they were riding on. They did not show any signs of Qi cultivators, and their aura was more similar to the beast warriors of Great Yan Dynasty. Vaguely, one could sense the aura of souls of beasts coming out from their bodies. Among these soldiers, 2 skinny men clad in brightly colored soft armors were the strongest. Their physical strength was nearly as strong as a nascent divinity cultivator. When the cultivators near and far saw that a fight had broken out, those mortals who worked as laborers immediately fled with their hands covering their heads, while those nascent soul cultivators dared not to come any closer. They simply rode on their escape beams and fled from the scene. Only those nascent divinity cultivators with stronger cultivation base dared to stand near the square and watch the show. Meanwhile, a great amount of divine will swept across from the sky. They were the divine wills of the heaven immortals from various powers in Yuhua Immortal City. Several hundred soldiers of Flying Leopard Army cried out at the same time. Abruptly, a few of them spread their arms and thrust toward Wu Qi. There were too many soldiers of the Flying Leopard Army at the scene. If all of them rushed forward, it would be a hindrance. The encirclement of a few armored soldiers sealed off all possible angles for Wu Qi to dodge. Another middle-aged man with a mustache, high cheekbones, and a sallow and skinny face pulled on Wu Qi's sleeve and shouted, Senior, you must come to our Profound Truth Pavilion to take a look. We have countless treasures there. Whether it's treasures, spirit treasures, or immortal treasures, we have everything. Ha! Thunderbolt Divine Lightning Seed refined by a golden immortal, do you want it? This is a supreme weapon for self-defense and life-saving, as well as for murder and robbery. Of course, Wu Qi would not dodge. With a sway of his body, he shrunk down and became 3 inches shorter, and his shoulders became a few inches wider. His facial muscles were slightly adjusted, looking 80 to 90% similar to his original face, but he looked like a completely different person. Because of the crowd, no one could see through the slight change in Wu Qi's body. He snorted coldly and suddenly leaped forward, brutally knocking away a few armored soldiers of the Flying Leopard Army who leaped at him, then punched them away. While he was still reminiscing the passionate kiss he had with Princess Zhangli before he left, and there was still a little bit of Princess Zhangli's rouge left on the corner of his mouth, a few idlers came up to Wu Qi and began to introduce the good places in Yuhua Immortal City to him. These few people talked extravagantly, describing the shops they recommended as rare in the heavens and impossible in the earth, as if one could become a primordial immortal just by visiting one of their shops. Sure enough, the topic had come. How did you know my whereabouts? Wu Qi cried out coldly. A jade-colored butterfly-shaped beam shot straight towards Wu Qi. Looking at Yu Hehuan, whose face was twisted, Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment. Suddenly, he pulled out the gold ingot he found from Wei Xiaoxiao, casually tossed it towards Yu Hehuan. Yu Hehuan, who was struggling with the earth element dragon scale shield, did not expect Wu Qi to strike suddenly. The gold ingot brought up a strong wind and smashed viciously onto Yu Hehuan's nose, collapsing the bridge of his nose and leaving a fist-sized dent on his face. Yu Hehuan sneered complacently. With one swift motion, he grabbed the spear stuck in his chest, pulled it out slowly, pointed it at Wu Qi and cried out, "Don't you know how formidable the great oracles of the human race are? He can communicate with deities and ghosts, and can see through the destiny of the people. So, what's so difficult about knowing your whereabouts? Wu Qi glared at the man. An early-stage nascent divinity virgin selling herself in a brothel? How many loan sharks did she owe to live such a miserable life? Yu Huan staggered to his feet. With one hand covering his nose, he pointed his other finger at Wu Qi and said furiously, "Didn't you hear what I just said? The deaths of Yu Heda, Yu Hetian, and Yu Heling are related to you. If you don't want to be minced into meat paste and fed to the leopards, then cripple your own cultivation base and follow me. Hand over the person who killed them, and I'll spare your soul for reincarnation." It was a cultivation technique that was completely different from that of Qi cultivators. Perhaps, it was a body tempering technique unique to the human race? However, Wu Qi could clearly sense that the nature of the souls of these armored soldiers was no different from that of ordinary mortals, and their lifespan was extremely limited. If not because they had fused with their beast souls, these people could at most live for over 100 years. Compared to the long lifespan of cultivators, and the heaven immortals who had escaped the suffering of reincarnation, the lifespan of these armored soldiers was just too short. Before Wu Qi set out, the earth element dragon scale shield had gone through another round of refinement. Wu Qi had fused the scales of snow-armored heaven-devouring python into the shield, replacing the dragon scales of whinnying dragon ancestor. Snow-armored heaven-devouring python was a demon python with the cultivation base of 25th tier heaven immortal realm, and its scales were at least 10 times tougher than those used by Wu Qi. As a result, the defensive and offensive strength of the earth element dragon scale shield had been greatly improved. While Yu Huan was shouting and screaming, a wild wind was seen approaching from a far distance. An astonishing pressure came from it, causing many houses in the surrounding to collapse. There was no cultivation technique related to body tempering in Scroll of Stealing. Looking at these armored soldiers, Wu Qi could not help but feel surprised. With the convenience of the teleportation formation, Wu Qi had arrived at Yuhua Heavenly Realm not long after he left Green Cliff Planet. However, the two strongest armored soldiers were merely early-stage nascent divinity cultivators. As such, Wu Qi was not afraid of them. As for Yu Huan, he was slightly weaker than the two armored soldiers. Wu Qi stared coldly at these people, sneered, and said, "Tell me, why are you attacking me when you are innocent?" Right at this moment, Wu Qi heard Yu Huan's roar. Beams of cold light streaked across the sky, while the spear tore through the air and produced ear-splitting whistling noises. The spear in Yu Huan's hand stirred up a strong gust of wind, bringing with it the blood of the cultivator who was casually killed by him just now, as it thrust towards the root of Wu Qi's thigh. Yu Huan howled miserably as blood sprayed out from his nose. Instinctively, he threw away the spear and covered his nose with both hands. However, just as he was about to clash with the earth element dragon scale shield, the spear had been bent into a crescent shape. As soon as he loosened his grip, the spear bounced back abruptly, and the sharp gored tip at the end of the spear shaft pierced forcefully into his chest. A loud noise rang out as the spear pierced into his chest, and the tremendous force sent him flying over 1,000 feet away. Grabbing Yu Huan, he retreated step by step to the teleportation formation which Wu Qi used to arrive here. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi said, "Everyone, stay back. Or else, I'll kill him." The handsome man, who had a powdered face and did not have any cultivation base, was clad in a small green shirt, and had a big red flower stuck on his head, said with a smile, "Senior, a virgin with early-stage nascent divinity cultivation base has just arrived in our Spring Harmony restaurant. Today is the best day to bid for her grooming. Senior, please don't miss this opportunity." If a virgin with early-stage nascent divinity cultivation base is used as a cultivation vessel, it is equivalent to 300 years of laborious cultivation. Upon hearing Wu Qi's scolding, the few idlers, who were so shocked by the pressure unleashed by Wu Qi, exchanged a glance with each other, then walked lazily to the side. A blinding light was bursting out from the teleportation formation behind them, as another group of cultivators had arrived at Yuhua Immortal City. The pain made Yu Huan's eyes go blank. He fixed his gaze on Wu Qi's face, which was very close to his face, and kept the appearance of Wu Qi in his mind. This was the main reason why Wu Qi had changed his height and appearance during the chaotic situation. He did not want to be hunted by Marquis Jian, Yuzong, and he did not want Yuzong to find Yuanhua sect based on his appearance. Yu Hehuan cried out in terror, "Stay back! Everyone, stay back! Or else!" Yuzong's brutal voice rang out, "Who dares to touch my beloved son?" Vaguely, Wu Qi unleashed a slight pressure and cried out in a low voice, "Shut up, all of you! Do you think I'm a greenhorn who has just made his debut? Are you trying to fool me with such a trick? Get lost, or else I'll attack you." Looking at these people, Wu Qi thought of those hooligans and scoundrels who solicited passengers at the entrance of the railway station back on Earth. He glanced around, wondering if there was another group of cultivators waiting nearby, waiting to beat him up and rob him of his money. Apart from the fact that the item spirit's sentience was too weak, as it had not cultivated to the realm of spirit immortal, the defensive and offensive strength of the earth element dragon scale shield was not weaker than ordinary lower-grade immortal items. Rolling his eyes helplessly, Wu Qi did not say a word. Instead, he grabbed the middle-aged man by the neck and pushed him away. What a thunderbolt ball crafted by a gold immortal! Will something crafted by a gold immortal be sold in Yuhua Heavenly Realm? It was not that Wu Qi looked down upon the immortals and cultivators of Yuhua Heavenly Realm, but perhaps no one here could afford the price of even the simplest immortal talisman produced by a gold immortal. The spear let out a sonorous cry. Wu Qi injected a thread of energy into the earth element dragon scale shield, strengthening its defense. He gave Yu Hehuan a cold glance and cried out, "Why did you kill someone for no reason? Why did you attack me for no reason?" Without waiting for Wu Qi to answer, Yu Hehuan cried out, "Somebody, capture him alive. Cripple his cultivation base, bring him back and interrogate him with torture." A large group of soldiers from the Flying Leopard Army tried to stop Yu Hehuan, but the rebound force from the spear was too strong. As it had fused with the two forces of Yu Hehuan and the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield, several dozens of soldiers, as well as their mounts, were knocked flying away by Yu Hehuan. Finally, they were stopped by the defensive barrier at the edge of the square. "His target is my thigh, and not any other vital body parts. Is he trying to capture me alive?" However, when these heaven immortals found out that one of the attacking parties was the Flying Leopard Army led by Yu Hehuan, they immediately retracted their divine will. The invisible voice transmission quickly covered the entire Yuhua Immortal City. All the cultivators who came to watch the show fled. In just a blink of an eye, only the Flying Leopard Army led by Wu Qi and Yu Hehuan remained in the square, which measured over 100 miles in both width and length, and was densely covered with nearly 100 teleportation formations that led to different heavenly realms. Wu Qi clenched his fingers together, and a crisp cracking noise was heard coming from Yu Hehuan's neck. His neck was nearly broken by Wu Qi. Over 100 well-trained soldiers from the Flying Leopard Army went to check on the injured Yu Hehuan, while the others quickly circled around and surrounded Wu Qi. The mounts of these soldiers looked ferocious, emanating a wild and untamed aura from their bodies. Wu Qi ran his divine will through these leopards, and found that none of them showed any signs of cultivation. However, they must have been tempered with some medicinal herbs or mystic techniques, as their fleshly bodies were so strong that they could be comparable to nascent soul cultivators who specialized in cultivating body cultivation techniques. Yu Hehuan sneered. Suddenly, his eyes went wide, and an even more vigorous force rushed out from his body. The tip of the spear and the golden shield rubbed violently, generating a large sheet of flame. Then, he cried out with a stern voice, "That guy has blocked my way, so he deserves to die. As for you, do you still remember Yuheda? I'm his half-brother, Yu Hehuan." Chapter 4:14. The jade-colored beam took the shape of a butterfly, bringing with it the style of slaughtering a country and burning a city. It drew an arc in the air as it thrust towards Wu Qi's forehead. Wu Qi laughed strangely. Casually, he raised Yu Hehuan up and used him as a shield. He stuck his body closely to Yu Hehuan's back, using him as a human target. Although Wu Qi had shrunk his body, Yu Hehuan was extraordinarily muscular. Wu Qi's entire body was completely covered by him. The jade-colored beam spun abruptly, nearly brushing past Yu Huan's face. Amidst an ear-splitting whistling noise, it smashed towards Wu Qi's temple. Wu Qi snorted coldly, twisted his body, and abruptly teleported himself 1 foot backward. Naturally, Yu Huan and his hand was pulled by him and teleported 1 foot backward as well. The jade-colored beam hit accurately on Yu Huan's cheek, piercing through the left side of his face and coming out from the right side. A miserable shriek burst out from Yu Huan's chest. His nose was dented, and there was a bloody wound on his cheek. Along with the jade-colored beam, fragments of his facial bones and teeth shot out from his right cheek, scattering messily all over the ground. What audacity! Yuzong suddenly appeared with a gloomy face. A thin layer of clouds was hovering above his head, and a huge jade puppet was flapping its wings gracefully amidst the clouds. Yuzong stared at Wu Qi with bloodshot eyes, squeezing out one word at a time from between his teeth, "Let go of my son." Wu Qi had his hand tightly gripped on Yu Huan's neck, his middle finger pressing against his neck bone. With just a little bit of force, he would be able to crush Yu Huan's bones. Yu Huan and the others did not cultivate their nascent divinity, including those armored soldiers of the Flying Leopard Army. Instead, they had their souls coexisted with beast souls, borrowing the power of the beast souls to fight. Therefore, once their bodies suffered an irreversible injury, they would lose their lives. Compared to immortal cultivators, who could regain their bodies even if their fleshly bodies were crushed, the lives of Yu Huan and even Yuzong were much weaker. After having Yu Huan's life in his hand, Wu Qi stared at Yuzong, smiled and said, "You want me to release him?" "He, the first condition. You are not qualified to negotiate with me." Yu Mu roared furiously. While Yu Miao's roar was still echoing across the square, Wu Qi had already grabbed Yu Huan's left arm, pinched his elbow and pulled forcefully, pulling Yu Huan's arm off his body. The sound of bone and flesh breaking rang out clearly in everyone's ears. Broken bones and flesh shot out in all directions. Grabbing Yu Huan's broken arm, Wu Qi sneered and said, "The first condition." Looking at his son, who was howling miserably, and then at the severed arm in Wu Qi's hand, Yu Mu fixed his gaze on Wu Qi and memorized Wu Qi's appearance and body shape, which had been slightly adjusted. Gritting his teeth, he let out a furious bellow and rushed into a shop on the side of the square. Dozens of miserable howls could be heard echoing out. In just a blink of an eye, Yu Mu had killed all the people in the shop, then rushed out with blood all over his body. A very strong murderous aura emanated from his body, as he pointed his finger at Wu Qi and said, "Fine, what are your conditions?" Wu Qi pointed at all the teleportation formations on the square and said, "Destroy all the teleportation formations, except the one that leads to Pangu continent, and bring me all the immortal stones." Give me all the jade slips that record the usage of the teleportation formations." Yu Mu was taken aback, but he immediately understood Wu Qi's intention. Wu Qi was afraid that Yu Mu would find out where he came from by following the teleportation formation he used. After all, in order to reach Yuhua Heavenly Realm, one had to use the large teleportation formations constructed by the other celestial court. As long as he asked around according to the time, he would be able to find out where Wu Qi came from. But, after destroying all the teleportation formations, who would know when Wu Qi came? Yu Mu rolled his eyes, and was about to come up with an excuse to refuse, when Wu Qi brazenly threw away Yu Huan's broken arm, then placed his left fingers on Yu Huan's left eye. Grinning hideously, Wu Qi said, "How many sons do you have that I can deal with like this?" Yu Mu felt a warm sensation in his chest, and he nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. Yu Huan was his only remaining son. Although he had a few daughters left, none of them could inherit his family business, and none of them could carry on the bloodline for him. Under the rule of the human emperor, all the major clans placed the most importance on the inheritance of the clan and the continuation of the bloodline. If Yu Huan was killed by someone, when would Yu Mu be able to give birth to another son? Waving his hand weakly, Yu Mu cried out in a low voice, "Destroy all the teleportation formations, except the one that leads to Pangu continent. Take all the immortal stones and give them to him. Also, Give him all the jade slips that record the usage of the teleportation formations. Without making a sound, the armored soldier of Flying Leopard Army punched his chest with his right fist, preparing to destroy the teleportation formations according to the order. Right at this moment, a beam of golden light shot up into the sky from Yuhua Immortal Abode. An immortal, clad in a crane cloak, his body shrouded in a bright green gleam, with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks, eyes darting from side to side, and a shrewd air emanating from his bones, flew out and landed on the square. The immortal cupped his fist and bowed to Wu Qi, then smilingly nodded at Yu Mu and said, Marquis Jian, all the teleportation formations here are constructed by the Celestial Court, and they cost a lot of money. How can you destroy them just like that? Ha, Marquis Jian is a man with a huge business, and the cost is nothing to him, right? His son is more important, right? Clicking his tongue and praising, the immortal turned to Wu Qi and said, Fellow Taoist, I'm San Yu. Ha ha ha, I'm the chief supervisor of Yuhua Heavenly Realm. Listen to me, fellow Taoist. This Marquis Jian only has 4 sons and 19 daughters. The other 3 sons were killed by someone before the new year, and the one in your hand is the only son of Marquis Jian. Yu Mu's face fell dramatically. But, as he was about to interrupt Heavenly Lord San Yu, the latter suddenly threw a tantrum. He pointed his finger at Yu Mu and cast the muting spell, an immortal spell. Yu Mu's throat turned stiff, and he could not say a single word. Heavenly Lord San Yu cried out hastily, the human emperor has decreed that any minister who does not have a son will have their title of nobility reduced by 1 rank every 100 years. Fellow Taoist, you can't sell him at a low price. Wu Qi raised his brows. Immediately, he had a very good impression of Heavenly Lord San Yu. The human emperor had decreed that any minister who did not have a son would have their title of nobility reduced by 1 rank every 100 years. The heavenly Tao had determined that the stronger a living being was, the harder it was for him to give birth to a child. As Yu Mu possessed a cultivation base equivalent to a 20th tier heaven immortal, not only would he have to work very hard, he would also have to be lucky enough to meet a girl who could bear his yang energy and give birth to his child. Perhaps, he would not have a son for several thousand years. After several thousand years, no matter how high Marquis Jian's title of nobility was into you, he would be reduced to a commoner by now, wouldn't he? Wu Qi laughed. Without hesitation, he fished out a jar of ointment and sprayed it on the wounds on Yu Hehuan's broken arm and face. The ointment concocted by Wu Qi himself was just like the ointment concocted by him for external wounds, which had a very violent nature. When the ointment sprinkled on Yu Hehuan's body, it was as if a bottle of strong nitric acid was sprayed on his heart, liver, and lungs. The pain made him howl and howl miserably, while pale red cold sweat broke out from all over his body. The severe pain made his heart race, and all the capillaries under his skin burst open. Coincidentally, Heavenly Lord San Yu's muting spell was broken by Yu Mu. Having witnessed everything, Yu Mu bellowed furiously, How dare you, a filthy Taoist! Without hesitation, Wu Qi pulled out a dagger and pressed it on Yu Hehuan's lower body. He looked at Heavenly Lord San Yu, smiled, and said, Does the human emperor have a rule that says the son of a certain Marquis Jian is a eunuch? Heavenly Lord San Yu tucked his hands under his sleeves, narrowed his eyes, and answered with a smile, Eunuch? Can that be considered as a son? Wu Qi let out a few strange laughs, then tilted his chin at Yu Mu and said, 100 immortal stones, this is the second condition. Heavenly Lord San Yu's eyes narrowed into 2 thin lines as he cried out, Also, if you insist on dismantling the teleportation formation, you must compensate for the cost and manpower of the teleportation formation, as well as the hush money for those immortal monarchs of Yuhua Heavenly Realm who have lost contact with the other heavenly realms. That will cost a lot of immortal stones as well. Yu Mu's body swayed, and he nearly fell to the ground. He stared at Heavenly Lord San Yu and bellowed, San Yu, don't go too far. Why would the human race need immortal stones? They have nothing to do with the cultivation of the human race. Heavenly Lord San Yu retorted with a sneer, Do you dare to say that you don't have any immortal stones in your storehouse? Don't human warriors need immortal stones to assist their cultivation? How dare you talk nonsense? Wu Qi sneered, then quietly swung the dagger in his hand downward. A part of Yu Huan's pants was cut open, and the dagger plunged into his vital part, cutting open his flesh. A tiny stream of blood trickled down from his body, dripping onto the ground. Yu Huan let out a strange cry as a large amount of liquid poured down from his body. He was so frightened that he wet his pants. Disgusted, Wu Qi retracted his left hand and said with a sneer, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and do it." Yu Mu's body trembled as he roared furiously, "Dismantle those teleportation formations and hand over all the materials to this bastard." "Bastards, are you all dead?" A large sheet of immortal light soared into the sky from Yu Hua immortal abode, as over 30 heaven immortals landed on a cloud with a smile on their faces. They stood in a straight line behind Heavenly Lord Sanyu while smiling. Heavenly Lord Sanyu stretched out his right hand, rubbed his thumb, index finger, and middle finger a few times as he chuckled and said, "Marquis Jian, you have yet to reach an agreement with me on compensation. Apart from the 18 giant teleportation formations that lead to Panga continent, there are another 81 teleportation formations that lead to various heavenly realms. TSK, they are all going to be dismantled. The cost of construction, labor, and hush money." Arg! Yu Mu's eyes turned red. Gnashing his teeth, he said, "Sanyu, I'll pay. You, don't add to my troubles." Heavenly Lord Sanyu smiled faintly, took a few steps back, and said, "Since you are willing to pay, everything will be fine." "Oh right, Marquis Jian, please don't run around if you have nothing to do in the future. If you hurt an officer of the Celestial Court, it will be very difficult for me to explain to my superiors." Wu Qi knew very well that the reason why Heavenly Lord Sanyu blackmailed Yu Mu was because he wanted to obtain an unexpected fortune, but most likely, he wanted to vent the anger of Immortal Chuan and the others. For no reason, Yu Zong went to Pulyuo Heavenly Realm and started a fight, and nearly killed Immortal Chuan. As the direct superior of Pulyuo Heavenly Realm, how could Heavenly Lord Sanyu not seize the opportunity to launch an attack? In just 15 minutes, all 81 teleportation formations that led to various heavenly realms were dismantled. All 81 immortal stones, which served as the core power of the teleportation formations, as well as other materials used to construct the formations, were stuffed into a large-capacity storage bag hanging on his waist by Wu Qi. When he was out in the world, he should never reveal his wealth. The image of Black Dragon's spirit ring was too glaring. Therefore, he hung both the ring and the spirit breeding ring in front of his chest instead of wearing them on his fingers. Immediately after that, one of Yu Mu's subordinates brought him 100 fist-sized lower-grade immortal stones. A very strong immortal energy drifted out from them, and Heavenly Lord Sanyu's eyes nearly popped out from their sockets. He stared blankly at the immortal stones and did not move. Wu Qi even wondered if Heavenly Lord Sanyu would rob him if he did not have Yu Huan's life and death in his hands, which made it difficult for him to kill Yu Huan. 100 immortal stones was a real fortune that could move one's heart. Wu Qi could not help but take a few deep breaths. Hastily, he shoved all the treasures into the storage bag. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi said, "The third condition is for Yu Huan to follow me to Panga continent. When we arrive at a safe place, I'll let him go." Yu Huan had to follow Wu Qi to Panga continent. Abruptly, Yu Mu moved his arms and roared furiously, "No way." All of a sudden, a sharp sword poked out from behind Wu Qi's back, thrusting towards the back of Wu Qi's head soundlessly. Chapter 4:15. The man who popped out from behind Wu Qi was a short, skinny, and shriveled man, who looked like a rat that had been dried up by the sun. He was holding a short sword in his hand. It was 1 foot and 2 inches long, as wide as a leek, and as thin as a gust of wind. A faint dark mist drifted behind his back, within which, a beast's soul that looked like a mouse with 6 legs could be vaguely seen. Without making any sound of wind or releasing any aura, the little man appeared out of nowhere behind Wu Qi, then thrust the sword forward. The tip of the sword went straight toward the back of Wu Qi's head at an incredible speed, as if it was going to pierce through Wu Qi's head. There was a layer of tricolored gleam flickering on the tip of the sword. Obviously, it was dipped in a deadly poison. Heavenly Lord Senyu saw the little man who suddenly came out from behind Wuqi, but he kept his mouth shut and did not say a word. He had greatly offended Yu Miao today, and had gotten a lot of benefits from him. So, he decided to let the assassins Yu Miao had arranged to kill Wuqi, which would at least help Yu Miao vent his anger, lest Yu Miao would vent all his anger on him later. Heavenly Lord Sanyu knew that Yu Miao was a cruel, tyrannical, and arrogant man, and he had a powerful backer in Yu Dynasty. Therefore, it was not a good idea to offend him. With his eyelids drooping, Heavenly Lord Senyu looked at Wuqi, the corners of his mouth curling up into a cold smile. Wuqi had all his attention on Yu Miao and Heavenly Lord Sanyu. Either one of them possessed a frightening power that could easily turn Wuqi into nothingness. Even though Wuqi seemed to have gained a certain upper hand now, Wuqi dared not to slack off. Yu Miao did not seem to be his forte, as his divine abilities and spells did not seem to be his forte. As for Heavenly Lord Sanyu, he was an 18th tier heaven immortal. If he suddenly cast a spell or something similar to a spell on Wuqi, it would bring him great trouble. Using his divine will, he carefully communicated with Hasuk, who was slumbering in his spiritual ocean. He was mentally prepared to sign an unfair contract with Hasuk and ask him to help him at any time. Suddenly, Wuqi saw the strange smile on Heavenly Lord Sanyu's face from the corner of his eyes. Wuqi's heart skipped a beat. He was shocked and released his innate divine sense. Immediately, Wuqi saw the short man in black behind him. He grabbed Yu Hehuan and leaped forward, moving his body 3 feet forward in an instant. With the momentum of teleporting forward to dodge, Wuqi gathered all the strength in his right leg and kicked backwards. The kick landed on the short man's lower abdomen, sending him flying 2 to 3 miles away soundlessly. Then, the man flew through the air without even making a sound. Before his short and shriveled body could touch the ground, it suddenly broke apart, turning into a fine mixture of blood and minced meat that sprinkled evenly on the ground. As he possessed the innate yin energy of yin and yang, no matter it was the innate energies of 5 elements, the dark yin water scripture, or the cultivation technique of Tao scripture of unity, Wuqi possessed a very deep and soft yin energy when he unleashed the power of innate yin energy. Although the innate yin energy of yin and yang was very powerful, it was soundless and traceless. Therefore, even when Wuqi exerted all his strength and kicked out with the 3 transformations of Flood Dragon, it did not make a single sound. When the enormous force of yin and yang smashed into the body of the short man, it felt as if his body was being ground by several million millstones. In just a blink of an eye, all his cells were corroded by the innate yin energy, nearly shattering them at the molecular level. Even his soul had turned into the tiniest soul particles in just a blink of an eye. Cold sweat broke out from Wuqi's back after killing the sneak attacker with just 1 kick. He gave Yu Miao a fierce look, who was still roaring furiously just a moment ago, then turned to look at Heavenly Lord Sanyu with a smile on his face. "Thank you for your kind gesture, Heavenly Lord, which saved me from being killed. I was lucky today, and it was all thanks to your kindness. If there is a chance in the future, I will definitely thank you generously." Yuzong stared coldly at Heavenly Lord Sanyu as he clenched his fists tightly. It was this damned ox nose again. Yuzong knew very well the overall strength of the man in black who loved to laugh. He was the most capable leader of the scouts under his command. Although his cultivation base was not strong, he was very good at hiding his tracks. With a sharp sword dipped in the soul-dispersing triflowered snake paste, he had once assassinated 7 heaven immortals. 7 heaven immortals. Yuzong hated Heavenly Lord Sanyu to the core, and yet, he was defeated by Wuqi, a little boy with a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm. Heavenly Lord Sanyu's heart sank. Every single word Wuqi said had struck his heart. But, he was just a little rascal with a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm. Heavenly Lord Sanyu laughed, shook his head, and left with all the heaven immortals behind him. In a carefree manner, Heavenly Lord Sanyu stretched out a finger and wagged it behind his back as he said, "Little friend, I've schemed against you today, and you've schemed against me as well. The karma has been settled, and we're even now. Wu Qi gave Heavenly Lord Sanyu a look and said in a deep voice, we're even now. As long as the Heavenly Lord does not attack the person in my hands today, I will owe you a favor. When we meet again in the future, I'll return the favor. Heavenly Lord Sanyu was taken aback, then shook his head disapprovingly, not even giving Wu Qi another look. He was just a puny peak-stage nascent soul cultivator. After slicing off a layer of golden paint from Yu Zong's body, Heavenly Lord Sanyu left with his men. Grabbing Yu Hehuan, Wu Qi carefully retreated to one of the 18 teleportation formations that led to Pangu continent. He stared at Yu Zong, who had an unsightly expression on his face, and said with a cold grin, Marquis Jian, did you send someone to assassinate me? If that's the case, I'll have to give you another arm. I hope Marquis Jian has enough spirit pills and miraculous medicines to reattach your young master's severed limbs. Yu Zong raised his right hand and stopped all the sneak attacks that he had set up in the surroundings. As the leader of the scouts, who had the strongest ability in hiding aura, was brutally killed by Wu Qi, he no longer had any hope in the other spies. He could still kill Wu Qi with some powerful techniques. But, if he was not careful enough, he would kill Yu Hehuan as well. How could he have the courage to try? He breathed out a long sigh, clenched his jaws and said, Marquis Jian admits defeat today. What else do you want? Wu Qi stretched out his left hand, raised a finger and waved it at Yu Zong. Marquis Jian has a great business, and even Heavenly Lord Sanyu praised him for that. The matter of you stabbing me with your sword is easy to solve. 100 immortal stones, and 10 carts of rare and precious materials. Don't try to deceive me with common goods. Marquis Jian is overseeing Yuhua Heavenly Realm, and I have no idea how many gifts he receives every day. I won't accept materials of inferior quality. Another 100 immortal stones? Yu Zong felt a suffocation in his chest, and he felt like bleeding. However, when he saw the terrified and despairing expression on Yu Hehuan's face, who was held in Wu Qi's hand, and thought about how he was left with only one son after his death, and then thought about the order of demoting his title and taking back his favor issued by the human emperor, for the sake of his entire clan, Yu Zong clenched his jaws and swallowed the grievance. Go, bring another 100 immortal stones and 10 carts of rare and precious objects that are prepared as tribute to this bastard, fellow Taoist. Yu Zong opened his mouth and gave the order loudly. Every word he uttered was filled with a strong smell of blood. Military orders must be obeyed, and the soldiers under Yu Zong's command were very efficient. Not long after that, they had brought all kinds of jewels according to Wu Qi's request. Wu Qi was dazzled by what he saw, and he applauded inwardly. It was true that 100 immortal stones were worth a lot, but those rare and precious materials were indeed worthy of being an important minister of the human race overseeing Yuhua Heavenly Realm. Some of them were classified as upper-grade immortal materials according to the Scroll of Stealing, which made them very rare and hard to come by. Especially when he saw 3 fist-sized, pitch-black metal lumps, which made the 18 celestial fiend puppets in Wu Qi's body struggle and roar at the same time. They were the pure yang nether fiend metal, which could only be produced after the core of a meteor had been attacked by the heavenly fiend aura for 10,000 years, and had been scoured by the dark water day and night in an abyss. This rare metal was an excellent material for crafting various magical items of the Fiend League. If the 18 celestial fiend puppets could devour this metal, their strength would be improved by at least 10 times, and even lower-grade immortal items would not be able to harm their bodies. On top of that, after being nourished by the enormous fiend energy contained in the pure yang nether fiend metal, the celestial fiend battle the heaven script of 18 celestial fiend puppets would be improved by a few levels as well. Depending on the amount and grade of the fiend energy contained in the metal, the puppets could at least improve their celestial fiend battle the heaven script to the level of peak stage nascent divinity cultivators. Perhaps, they could even break through the level of peak stage nascent divinity cultivators and transform into 18 celestial fiend immortals of great strength. Hastily putting away all the materials, Wu Qi grabbed Yu Hehuan with one hand and cried out sternly, "Fine, I'm not a man with insatiable greed. When I arrive at Pangu continent and arrive at a safe place, I'll release your young master." Yu Huan, don't play any tricks, or I'll perish together with your young master, and neither of us will have a good ending. Carefully, Wu Qi activated the teleportation formation, then selected the direction of Panga continent from a thread of divine will that was sent out from the formation. For a moment, several 100 million different coordinates of the teleportation formation rushed into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean at the same time. Wu Qi randomly selected a coordinate marked as a public teleportation formation and activated it. A blinding light rushed out from the teleportation formation, and in the blink of an eye, both Wu Qi and Yu Huan disappeared without a trace. Upon seeing Wu Qi and Yu Huan disappear from his sight at the same time, Yu Zong threw his head back and gave a furious roar. Abruptly, he spun around with a whirlwind and said furiously, "Send out a message to the teleportation formation that he went to, asking us to send out some experts to rescue young master and capture that shrewd Taoist alive. Remember, capture him alive, you must capture him alive. I want to let him know the consequences of offending me." One of the armored soldiers bowed and answered, "Understood." A cold smile emerged on Yu Zong's face as he said, "Shrewd Taoist, it will take you 3 years to travel from Yuhua Heavenly Realm to Panga Continent through the teleportation formation, no matter how fast it is. 3 years is more than enough for me to mobilize my men and kill you." Complacently, Yu Zong strode into the teleportation formation, reaching out his hand to touch the jade slip that recorded the usage information. But, upon touching it, Yu Zong was so angry that he leaped and cursed. After Wu Qi activated the teleportation formation, he had erased all the data in the jade slip with his divine will. Therefore, how could Yu Zong find out which teleportation formation on Panga continent Wu Qi had chosen? "San Yu, is this your trick again? How could an outsider erase all the information in the teleportation formation? You're a rotten Taoist." Yu Zong roared furiously, his lips twitching with anger. "Go, inform our clan. Tell them that I've exhausted all my belongings to ask our clan to mobilize all our men and seal off all the public teleportation formations on Panga continent that lead to outer heavenly realms." Yu Zong howled hysterically. Chapter 4:16. Wave after wave of warm and vigorous energy came from the ground beneath his feet, comforting the minds of Wu Qi and the cultivators like the kiss of a mother. Then came the earth element dragon scale shield. Among the rare materials Yu Zong offered, there were many that were suitable for Wu Qi to devour. Because of the contribution from those fiends, Wu Qi's divine sense and willpower were now extremely abundant, and he did not care about the loss. Just like the sword of greedy wolf, he had given birth to an item spirit in the earth element dragon scale shield. Yu Huan's expression flickered. Clenching his jaws, he stared at Wu Qi and cursed, "You bastard. Don't you dare insult me. What do you want to know?" On the other hand, it would take several years to travel from outer heavenly realms to Panga continent. On top of that, as Panga continent was constantly absorbing chaotic airflows to expand itself, outer heavenly realms were getting further away from it. Perhaps, after a few eons, it would take them over 10 years to travel to Panga continent. Along the way, Wu Qi swallowed 3 pieces of pure yang nether fiend gold. Immediately, the 18 celestial fiend puppets divided the 3 pieces of pure yang nether fiend gold equally, using them to strengthen their bodies and absorb the fiend energies contained in them to cultivate the celestial fiend battle the heaven script. It was unknown where Yu Zong found these 3 rare materials, but the fiend energies contained in them were top-notch. In just a few months, the puppets had pushed their cultivation of celestial fiend battle the heaven script straight to the realm of heaven immortal, possessing the overall strength of a 36th tier heavenly fiend. Eventually, Wu Qi's innate nascent soul could no longer contain the full divine sense and willpower, and had no choice but to store all the suddenly improved willpower in his spiritual ocean. As a result, it actually formed into a crystal-clear thumb-sized golden willpower amalgamation. As for the energy attacks such as Yin Flame, he simply let the puppets swallow them into their bodies, speeding up the absorption of various materials. Only less than 1% of the various materials plundered from Great Yan's secret vault had been digested. With the help of these powerful Yin flames, the impurities contained in the materials were extracted, and only the purest part was fused with the puppets, making them tougher and stronger. Wu Qi pinched his fingers and counted the time in his mind. He packed up all the miscellaneous items he had, shoved everything in his storage bag into the Black Dragon's spirit ring, and once again seized the neck of the unconscious Yu Huan. Yu Huan's cultivation base was equivalent to an early-stage nascent divinity cultivator, but he still couldn't abstain from eating. For the past 3 years, if not for Wu Qi feeding him with the fasting pills and clean water, he would have long been starved to death. Normally, Wu Qi did not have the time to use his natal true flame to help the puppets refine the materials. Whenever he thought of it, he would just send a thread of energy into them, and usually, they would have to work hard to absorb and refine the energy. Now, with the help of the Yin fire tribulation that only appeared when these demon immortals ascended to immortality, the process of absorption and refinement was accelerated by dozens of times. Along the way, Wu Qi had refined all the treasures he had, and even refined those treasures he robbed using a mystic technique. Taking the opportunity when countless fiends came to him and sacrificed their willpower, Wu Qi had refined all the treasures he had into spirit items. In the end, when he had upgraded the gold coin, which could drop a magical treasure into an upper-grade spirit item, the relic in his spiritual ocean had quietly vanished. This was Pangu continent, the birthplace of the human race. Right when Wu Qi was shedding tears, a few men clad in gray linen clothes and standing on a small mound off in the distance suddenly had their gazes fixed on him. Their eyes were brimming with killing intent, and it made the fine hairs on the back of Wu Qi's neck stand up. Yu Huan clenched his jaws and said, "Since you want to kill me, why should I answer your question?" The distance between Pangu continent and outer heavenly realms was extremely far. It was an enormous distance that even ordinary immortals could not imagine. Apart from a very few heavenly realms that were blessed by the heavens and close to Pangu continent, for some of the remote heavenly realms, it would take them a few years to travel in an alien dimension, even if they used teleportation formations. In the end, refining the fiends with the divine flame of order and extracting their willpower had become an instinct. Wu Qi simply pulled out the sword of Greedy Wolf and Xuanhao sword, unleashing a stream of true flame that melted the two swords into a puddle of liquid. After that, he rummaged through his storage bag and pulled out a pile of rare and precious materials that Yumu offered, then refined the sword of Greedy Wolf once again. Sigh, it seems like I'm not fated with the Buddhist League after all. Sensing the disappearance of the relic, Wu Qi sighed softly. Wu Qi patted on Yu Huan's neck and woke him up from his unconsciousness. After living for 3 years with only fasting pills and clean water, Yu Huan had become so skinny that he looked like a bag of bones, and his eyes were stiff and lifeless. Wu Qi stared coldly at Yu Huan, sneered, and said, "You will definitely die. Because I won't allow you to hunt and kill my friends and lovers. They are the ones who killed 3 of your brothers." Wu Qi sneered and gave Yu Huan a punch on his face, turning his face, which had healed with great difficulty, into a mess again. Then, he said coldly, "Answer my questions obediently, and I'll kill you after I walk out of the teleportation formation. Then, you will have a chance to live. If you don't answer me, you will die right now. Take a guess, do you think I have the courage to do that?" It only took him 15 minutes to travel from one heavenly realm to another through a large-scale teleportation formation. "Why don't you kill me now?" asked Yu Huan blankly. Yu Huan's eyes lit up as he said in a low voice, "You can't escape, there's no way you can. The power of the human race is extremely strong on Pangu continent. There's no way you can escape. One sword strike was enough." According to the rules of the heavenly Tao, when a celestial fiend puppet cultivated the body of a heavenly fiend, a heavenly tribulation would descend. However, as Wu Qi was trapped in the space tunnel now, the power of heavenly tribulation could not lock onto his body, and the thunder tribulation could not descend. Nevertheless, as the thunder tribulation did not descend, those strange and bizarre fiends and Yin flames swarmed towards him like flies that smelled the scent of blood. The aura emanated by the advancement of a heavenly fiend was more than enough to drive all fiends crazy. Therefore, there was no reason for them not to come and enjoy the feast. Along the way, Wu Qi repeated all sorts of questions over and over again, and it took him 7 days and 7 nights to interrogate Yu Huan. The innate energies of 5 elements rushed into the sword of Greedy Wolf along with his willpower, catalyzing the sword to give birth to a powerful divine will. The sword had given birth to a divine will, and the sword of Greedy Wolf had transformed into a true spirit item. As long as Wu Qi continued to refine it, allowing its item spirit to cultivate into a spirit immortal, he would naturally have a prime immortal item. After fusing the essence of Xuanhao sword into the sword of Greedy Wolf, Wu Qi then fused some other rare and precious materials into the sword. This time, Wu Qi removed the hilt of the sword of Greedy Wolf, turning it into a sharp killing weapon with a razor-sharp edge. When the sword of Greedy Wolf was reformed, Wu Qi separated a very powerful willpower from his relic and fused it into the sword. When the last bit of energy in Yu Huan's stomach was squeezed dry, Wu Qi felt his body lightened. A bright light flickered before his eyes, and they were now standing on a teleportation formation. They were surrounded by numerous teleportation formations that kept blinking, and off in the distance were mountains that towered into the clouds. A chilly breeze was brushing against their faces, bringing along a fragrant aroma of flowers that could penetrate one's heart and spleen. The sky was clear and lofty, with white clouds drifting in the sky. Huge birds were seen wheeling in the sky, and the surrounding temperature and humidity made one feel extremely comfortable. Tears shot out from Wu Qi's eyes. Just like the other cultivators who walked out from the teleportation formation, he suddenly burst into tears. "You're going to die, but not now." Wu Qi laughed, shook his head and said, "If I kill you now, when I walk out from the teleportation formation, and they find out that you're already a dead man, wouldn't they kill me immediately? By keeping you alive, at least I'll have more time to deal with them, don't you think so?" Perhaps the cultivation speed of the item spirit born in this way was not as fast as the souls of those divine beasts and immortal birds captured by Wu Qi, but in terms of intelligence and control, as well as having a blood connection with Wu Qi, it could be considered as a true prime immortal item. Wu Qi laughed joyfully, unleashing the divine flame of order to his heart's content. If any fiends were to attack him, he could just unleash the divine flame of order and turn all of them into nothingness. An endless stream of soul essence fused into Wu Qi's 10 innate nascent souls, nourishing Wu Qi's divine sense and making it clearer and more condensed, as if it had been purified from a mist into a liquid state. At that very moment, Wu Qi even had an illusion that he had returned to his mother's womb, and that this was the place where the human race should live. All these conditions made every cell in Wu Qi's body begin to cheer. An unprecedented life force rushed into his body from under his feet. He had an impulse of returning to his hometown after a long journey. His blood began to boil, and he seemed to hear a desolate, ancient roar that came from the primordial era. Along the way, the celestial fiend puppets had yet to transcend their fiend immortal thunder tribulation, and their aura kept spreading out, attracting countless fiends from outer domains to pounce on them. But, no matter how hard they tried, the divine flame of order was the nemesis of all fiends. Countless fiends were forcibly refined by the divine flame, and Wu Qi's divine sense had been improved to an unimaginable level. Immediately, he turned around and looked over his shoulder. Here comes the message. When an ordinary fiend cultivator became an immortal, the Yin Flame Fiend Tribulation was a great test for their fleshly body. It could easily turn their flesh and bones into ashes, forcing them to be reincarnated. However, for the celestial fiend puppets, the Yin Flame could only refine their flesh and bones, but it could not refine all sorts of rare and precious materials. As a puppet that had been tempered and tempered thoroughly, it could only be a helping hand for Wu Qi to strengthen himself. Smilingly, Wu Qi patted Yu Huan's face and said sarcastically, "A man who peed his pants because of fear. I bet you don't have the courage to die, do you? Answer my question, and you still have a slim chance to live. Perhaps, the men your father deployed on Panga continent can save you?" In the Buddhist cultivators, there was a special name for this kind of willpower, Saraira. Although he could wield the Xuanhao sword easily, Wu Qi did not have the habit of using 2 swords at the same time. According to the Tao of Sword taught to him by Nye Baihong, when one cultivated the Tao of Sword control to the most profound level, one sword could break all techniques, and one sword could control all treasures. So, why would he need too many flying swords and magical treasures? After forming the Saraira, Wu Qi did not know whether he should cry or laugh. Pilgrim Gu he said that he was fated with the Buddhist League, but it was just a mantra used by Buddhist cultivators. However, after Wu Qi successfully formed the Saraira today, he himself felt that the feeling was rather unpleasant. With an ordinary teleportation formation, it would take no more than a snap of a finger to travel from one galaxy to another. With one hand clutching Yu Hehuan's neck, Wu Qi transformed into a beam of light and sped through the space tunnel. As it was a super long-distance teleportation formation, it brought a very heavy burden to the space. Wu Qi had no choice but to produce the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield, transforming it into a yellow light barrier that enveloped his entire body. Only with that could he barely withstand the tremendous pressure from all directions. Without any hesitation, Wu Qi had broken Yu Hehuan's right arm, which was still intact. "Cut the crap. Now, I'll ask, and you answer," he cried out in a low voice. Chapter 4:17. Something was not right with the atmosphere. The sense of life or death crisis that came from Wu Wang's memory made Wu Qi's hair stand on end. In just a fraction of a second, Wu Qi had cast an incantation at the teleportation formation, trying to activate it and randomly select a coordinate to teleport himself out of this place. However, when he cast the incantation on the formation, it did not respond at all. Not only that, the blinking lights of the hundreds of teleportation formations in the vicinity and far away had all been extinguished, and not a single person could walk out of them. The dull beating of war drums echoed out as hundreds of cultivators flew up from afar on clouds and cried out sternly, "Fellow Taoists, please leave at once." These cultivators were all clad in standard black robes, with jade belts around their waists and strange 2-feet-long gauze crowns on their heads. Jade medallions of various colors hung from their waists, carved with incomplete lotus flowers according to their status. The waist medallions of immortal monarchs of the celestial court, such as Immortal Chuan, were divided into 4 colors, purple, gold, green, and white, and the lotus flowers carved on them were all perfect 9-petaled immortal lotuses. On the other hand, the lotus flowers carved on these people's waists were either 4 or 5 petals, which meant that they were only servants of the celestial court, and were not officially part of the celestial court. In other words, they were police officers, urban management officers, and not official civil servants of the celestial court. But for itinerant cultivators, even those with the cultivation base of heaven immortals, they did not dare to show any displeasure to these servants of the celestial court. Under the guidance of hundreds of cultivators, nearly 100,000 itinerant cultivators with varying cultivation bases left the scene quickly. They walked, not riding on clouds or flying swords. Even the dozen or so heaven immortals from outer heavenly realms obediently left the scene on foot. Wu Qi marveled inwardly. This was the first time he had seen the might of the celestial court. Among these servants, many of them only had the cultivation base of Jin Dan realm. As soon as the people of the celestial court left, the sound of war drums in the distance became more and more oppressive. A strong gust of wind blew over from afar. A valiant, tiger-like armored warrior, riding on a mount that looked like a tiger but was treading on a blood-red mist, rushed over along with the strong gust of wind. Walking at the forefront was a team of 12 burly men from the Dragon Count Kingdom. These long bow men stood 100 feet tall, and their bare upper bodies were fully covered with golden fiend runes. Wu Qi scanned them with his divine will and found out that there was a very strong power flowing in their bodies, which was almost comparable to a peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator. In other words, relying on their innate divine abilities, these long-bow people could fight head-on against a 36th-tier heaven immortal, or even a 35th-tier heaven immortal. However, they didn't form the Jin Dan, nascent soul, or primordial spirit, which were unique to cultivators. Thinking of the 10,000 long-bow men in his spirit breeding ring, who had formed the Jin Dan and were now trying to break through the nascent soul realm, Wu Qi's eyelids twitched violently. What these long-bow men were practicing were the orthodox divine abilities and techniques of the human race, right? Just like Yuzong and Yu Huan, they did not practice the technique of immortal cultivation. Yet, it seemed these long-bow men in the spirit breeding ring had taken the wrong path. Each of the 12 long-bow men was carrying a flagpole that stood 1,000 feet tall, with huge war flags fluttering in the wind. 10 of the war flags were embroidered with a huge character of Yu, a green character with a black background. They emanated a vast aura of desolation, which made Wu Qi feel suffocated. On the 2 flags in the middle, a row of characters was embroidered from top to bottom: Yuzong, the Marquis of Great Yu, the protector of the Holy Land, the Marquis of Great Yu, Marquis Li. The long-bow men were approaching step by step. With a single step, they could cover a distance of several tens of feet, approaching like a gust of wild wind. Behind him, several thousand armored soldiers flew at top speed while emanating a murderous aura. When they were about a mile away from Wu Qi, they suddenly split up and ran wildly, forming a huge circular formation that trapped Wu Qi in the middle. A sonorous bugle echoed out from behind, as several dozens of armored soldiers escorted an old man, who was skinny and old, clad in a black sackcloth. He seemed to be at his last gasp, as if he was not far away from death. Suddenly, Yu Huan roared with laughter and said, "Release me, you unruly Taoist. This is Marquis Li, Yuzong, my distant great-granduncle. His valiant tiger army guards an area of 100 million miles, and he has 1 million mighty soldiers under his command. Furthermore, his overall strength is comparable to a gold immortal. You're dead meat. Release me, I'll plead for mercy on your behalf. I'll just torture you to death, and leave you with a broken soul for reincarnation. What do you think?" Wu Qi gave Yu Huan a tight slap on his face, then casually pulled one of his ears off and threw it to the ground. Yu Huan howled miserably due to the pain, and dared not to say another word. However, the hatred and resentment in his eyes seemed as if it could turn into the nether flame of the 9 underworlds and shoot out to kill. Panting heavily, Yuzong walked slowly to a place less than 1,000 feet away from Wu Qi, then halted his steps cautiously. He gave the ear Wu Qi threw to the ground a glance, and dared not to take another step forward. He coughed a few times forcefully, spitting out a few mouthfuls of thick black phlegm. His body trembled slightly as he pointed his trembling finger at Wu Qi and said, "Little Taoist, leave Huan behind, and tell me who ordered you to do this. I'll let you die a quick death today." Wu Qi studied Yuzong curiously. Ignoring Yuzong's request, he asked, "Since your overall strength is comparable to a gold immortal, why do you look like this? I suppose you don't have long to live, do you?" Yuzong smiled faintly, then coughed violently again. Shaking his head, he said, "For the human race, there is life and death. This is determined by the great Tao of the heaven and earth. Immortal cultivators like you may live an immortal life, but you are no longer part of the human race. Ever since I was young, I've fused with the beast soul of Tiger, and my soul has been living and dying together with him. Borrowing the power of his beast soul, I've lived for 2 periods." A stream of white mist sprayed out from the top of Yuzong's head, from within which, a beast soul of a white tiger flew out like a living creature. The white tiger beast soul looked very old, too. It lay on the ground lazily, and its beard, claws, and teeth were all gone. Although it was an extremely aged white tiger, it was emanating a frightening aura that nearly suffocated Wu Qi. It was a beast soul with a cultivation base close to that of a gold immortal. Sighing lightly, Yuzong smiled in a relaxed, carefree, and contented manner, compared to those members of my clan who have returned to the transmigration in less than 100 years, what do I have to regret? If it weren't for that kid Yuzong, who offered all his wealth to buy your life and save that troublemaker Huan, and if I hadn't been in a hurry to save more money for my descendants, how could I have had the time to surround this place over the past 3 years? Wu Qi was taken aback. Have all the teleportation formations connecting the outer heavenly realms to Panga continent been surrounded? He asked in surprise. Yuzong grinned and nodded seriously. Money moves people's hearts. That kid Yuzong is guarding the outer heavenly realms, and he is much better than these poor seniors of ours on Panga continent when it comes to looting. In the time it takes us to earn a copper coin, he might have earned an energy stone. How could I not be tempted by the fact that he offered all his wealth to protect his last son? Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. There were hundreds of millions of teleportation formations connecting Panga continent to outer heavenly realms, and 60% of them were owned by various major powers. For safety's sake, Wu Qi had chosen the other 40% which were public teleportation formations. There were at least 100 million of these teleportation formations, and with the sky-high reward offered by Yu Mu, these marquises of Yu dynasty were able to surround all these public teleportation formations. The overall strength of Yu dynasty was indeed extremely frightening. However, Panga continent was so huge, and the human race had occupied almost the entire continent. As the common ruler of the human race, it was only natural that Yu dynasty had such a hidden strength. On top of that, even the officials of the Celestial Court who were in charge of controlling these teleportation formations had to cooperate with Yuzong and others. It showed that the human race had a tremendous influence even when dealing with the Celestial Court. With a wry smile, Wu Qi looked at Yuzong, shook his head, and said with a sigh, "It seems I'm going to die today." Carefully, Yuzong took a step forward and said gently, "If nothing goes wrong, you're going to die today, little Taoist." I can't control my strength once I strike. If I kill you, I might kill He Huan along the way. So, you should release He Huan, let me interrogate him, and kill you after that. Wouldn't that be the end of the matter? Wu Qi glanced around, and saw some servants of the Celestial Court flying high up in the sky. They had long activated all the restrictive formations that surrounded the square, and the mighty power of these restrictive formations made even Wu Qi feel troubled. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi twisted and broke Yu Hehuan's neck, then smashed his fist on the back of his head, shattering his brain and soul into wisps of smoke. After that, with a thought in Wu Qi's mind, all 18 celestial fiend puppets hiding in his body released the mystic technique of concealing their aura, releasing the aura of fiend immortals they had just cultivated into. After killing Yu Hehuan with just one strike, Yuzong roared furiously. With a blink of his body, he thrust his hand towards Wu Qi. Yuzong's speed was extremely fast, at least 100 times faster than the teleportation divine ability of ordinary immortals. Although Wu Qi could not see his movement clearly with the mystic eyes of universe, his palm had already grabbed Wu Qi's neck. At this critical juncture, a plume of dark smoke towered up into the sky from Wu Qi's body. Vaguely, countless twisted faces of fiends could be seen amidst the dark smoke. As soon as the celestial fiend puppets unleashed their fiend immortal aura, the heavenly tribulation came chasing after them like a shadow. With 18 fiend immortals transcending their fiend immortal tribulations at the same time, the power of the thunder tribulation had increased exponentially. Even worse, within the range of the thunder tribulation were Wu Qi, whose overall strength was comparable to a 36th tier heaven immortal, Yuzong, whose cultivation base was nearly at the level of a gold immortal, several dozens of generals of formidable tiger army whose overall strength was comparable to a heaven immortal, several thousand elite armored soldiers, and 12 long-bow men whose cultivation base was comparable to a heaven immortal. Not far away from them were 2 heaven immortals of the Celestial Court, who were in charge of managing these teleportation formations, and several hundred servants, who were watching the show. The nature of the thunder tribulation, which was originally targeted at the 18 celestial fiend puppets, had changed immediately, becoming a series of tribulations targeting everyone present. The laws of heavenly Tao did not have sentience, and they could only judge based on the power of laws. As there were so many people down below, the laws of heavenly Tao simply determined that they were here to help the 18 fiend immortals transcend their thunder tribulation. As a result, the sky within an area of 100,000 miles in circumference suddenly turned blood red. Large clumps of pitch-black tribulation clouds that looked like tainted blood emerged out of thin air above Wu Qi, while a heavenly eye of thunder tribulation, measuring 1,000 feet in diameter, slowly opened above Wu Qi and his company. In just a blink of an eye, the ordinary series of thunder tribulation of 18 fiend immortals had transformed into the consecutive holy fiend tribulation of the ninth heaven, which was targeted at fiend immortals of gold immortal realm. Streams of frightening pressure came smashing down from above. Wu Qi and Yuzong let out a miserable shriek at the same time, as blood sprayed out from their bodies. The consecutive holy fiend tribulation of the ninth heaven imposed by the laws of heavenly Tao was more than enough to kill an 18th-tier gold immortal. Yuzong's face turned pale with fright, and he spun and fled in panic. Wu Qi threw his head back and gave a long cry complacently, killing a gold immortal with a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm. Lao Tzu is the strongest man under the heaven. Before Yuzong could run 10 feet away, the heavenly eye of thunder tribulation moved and unleashed an invisible, colorless, and traceless thunderbolt. Chapter 4:18. What a heavenly sin! Wu Qi cried out in a strange voice as he sensed the thunder tribulation above his head, which even his divine sense could not detect. It was indeed a heavenly sin. The thunder tribulation had chosen Yu Miao as its main target, and was heading straight for him. Among all the people present, Yu Miao had the highest cultivation base, and his aura was the strongest. Who else would the thunder tribulation strike if not him? It was like a lighthouse on a dark night, and all kinds of flies, mosquitoes, bedbugs, and grasshoppers would fly toward him. Yu Miao gave a muffled roar as he squatted down, clenched his fists, and threw them into the sky with all his might. The soul of the white tiger hovering above him threw its head back and roared, then transformed into a dazzling beam of white light and attached itself to Yu Miao's body. Out of nowhere, a set of thick, white armor appeared on his body, and his fists were covered with thick gloves. In just a flash, his aura had become 10 times stronger, and his cultivation base had risen from the level of a gold immortal to infinitely close to that of a gold immortal. A loud cracking noise rang out as the invisible thunder tribulation struck Yu Miao's fists. He gave a muffled snort, and his body was abruptly enveloped by a strong, gray light. Countless blinding electric bolts twisted and coiled around his body, while numerous divine flames of pure yang, such as the divine flame of order, the divine flame of three yang, and the divine light of evil vanquishing, were burning his armor and fleshly body. With just one strike, Yu Miao's armors were gone, and his skin was burned to ashes by a few divine flames. His skin was covered with countless blisters of various sizes, and there were even a few holes burned by the electric bolts that went straight through his internal organs. Dark smoke was rising from all over him, and hot streams of fire were shooting out of his 7 apertures. The thunder tribulation had nearly roasted him from the inside out. This was just the first thunder tribulation. Before he could react, the second thunder tribulation came whistling down from the tribulation cloud. Finally, with his mystic eyes of universe, a faint red shadow could be seen when the thunder tribulation struck down this time. It was this faint red light that made Wu Qi's pores shrink. Without hesitation, he immediately produced the earth element dragon scale shield and placed it above his head. He was no longer using the golden dragon scales transformed from the earth element dragon scale shield. Instead, he had placed the true body of the earth element dragon scale shield above his body. Fearing that the earth element dragon scale shield could not withstand the power of the thunderbolt, Wu Qi clenched his jaws and drew out nearly all the pure and boundless earth element energies from the acquired earth element pearl in his dantian, then crazily injected them into the earth element dragon scale shield. The acquired earth spirit pearl contained a vast and boundless amount of earth element energy. The amount of earth element energy contained in one pearl was nearly equal to the total energy reserves of several dozens of heaven immortals. Wu Qi hastily drew out all the earth elemental energies in one go. The surging earth elemental energies were like a raging river rushing into a small stream, nearly bursting his body. Fortunately, his body had been transformed by the innate yin qi, and the meridians in his body had become extremely soft and supple. Although his meridians were stretched to the extreme, they were still barely intact, like elastic rubber tubes. The earth element energies transformed into a yellow flood and shot out from Wu Qi's palm, shooting straight into the earth element dragon scale shield. A deep dragon roar rang out from the earth element dragon scale shield, and the bright light retracted abruptly. Then, a 3 feet thick halo that looked like a copper bell and had a luster that looked like it was forged from yellow soil wrapped around Wuqi tightly. The surface of the halo was smooth and clean, as if it was forged from gold and iron. Right in the middle of the halo, a divine character that represented the meaning of earth creation in the primordial divine script was emitting a bright and heavy light. Right after the halo was fully formed, the pale red thunder tribulation smashed onto Yuzong's body, who felt like weeping but had no tears. Crack! Boom! A loud boom rang out, and an invisible shockwave swept across the surroundings. All the cultivators whose cultivation base was below Heaven Immortal Realm, including the fearsome warriors of the formidable Tiger Army, were dismembered. Their bodies remained motionless, but they suddenly exploded right where they stood, turning into countless tiny light particles that shot in all directions. Together with a bizarre and magnificent 7-colored light, these light particles scattered in all directions like several thousand fireworks exploding. Thousands of light screens interweaved and collided in the void, transforming into hundreds of thousands of colors of different shades. The effect of the light and shadow was so beautiful that it could intoxicate one's heart. It was a cruel and frightening scene. However, Wuqi was not in the mood to enjoy the beautiful and frightening scene. The invisible shockwave had slammed onto the earth element dragon scale shield, causing a shockwave that could vibrate several 100 million times per second to sweep across the shield. The earth element dragon scale shield produced a series of cracking noises, and a few cracks nearly appeared on its surface. Fiercely, Wuqi bit his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood essence onto the earth element dragon scale shield. It was as if the shield was fed with a stimulant, as it shone with a dazzling light again, and even expanded a few inches in size. The frightening shockwave only lasted for 3 seconds, but 90% of Wuqi's energy had been consumed. Apart from the 2 Heaven Immortal officials sent by the Celestial Court to guard this place, there were also several dozens of captains of the formidable Tiger Army, whose overall strength was comparable to a Heaven Immortal. As soon as the thunderbolt struck down, all living beings within a circumference of 100 miles were killed. No matter it was cultivators, wild beasts, flowers, trees, or even the microorganisms in the soil, they were all wiped out by the thunderbolt. All the mountains and rivers were flattened, and with Yu Miao, who bore the brunt of the impact, the ground within 100 miles was turned into a circular flatland that sank 30 feet deep into the ground. The surface was as smooth as a mirror, and not even a single wrinkle could be found. All the teleportation formations and defensive formations had turned into ashes, leaving not even a trace behind. Yu Miao squatted stiffly on the ground, with wisps of dark smoke rising from his body. The white armor on his body had disappeared, and the soul of the white tiger was lying panting in the white smoke behind him. All the tiger fur on its body had fallen off, leaving nothing behind. Ah! 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 Yu Miao stared blankly at the heavenly eye of thunder tribulation in the sky, uttering meaningless and idiotic, ah, sounds. He was struck dumb by the 2 consecutive thunder tribulations that targeted at gold immortals. 70% of his muscles were carbonized, 50% of his meridians were broken, and more than half of his internal organs were cooked. This was his current condition. If not for the fact that his beast soul was the bloodline of the white tiger and possessed a very strong power, Yu Miao would have long been turned into smoke by the thunder tribulation together with his beast soul. Yu Miao was afraid, and he began to regret his decision. Large drops of tears rolled down from the corners of his eyes as he roared hoarsely, "I don't want to die yet. Bastard little Taoist, aren't you trying to trick me? You are only a peak stage nascent soul cultivator, but what the hell did you use to cultivate into a fiend immortal?" Yu Miao was a shrewd man, and he could tell with just one glance that Wuqi was only a peak stage nascent soul cultivator. Although his overall strength did not match his cultivation base, it was not uncommon for it to happen. The disciples of some legendary great figures practiced very powerful cultivation techniques, and it was common for them to kill those who were several times stronger than them. But, the dark smoke rising from Wuqi's body was clearly the unique sign of a fiend immortal. What was the reason behind this? Wu Qi paid no attention to Yu Miao. In a flurry, he fished out an 8th-grade immortal pill from Black Dragon's spirit ring and injected a stream of energy into it. After shattering it, it transformed into a gust of green wind and rushed into Yu Miao's body. "Hang in there, old man," Wu Qi roared. "It's all up to you whether we can survive or not. The surrounding void is sealed by the thunder tribulation, and we can't teleport anymore. It's all up to you, old man." The 8th-grade immortal pill, the 5 spirits life rejuvenation pill, was concocted by Patriarch Jiang Yun, and was specially given to Wu Qi to protect himself when he was away from home. Although its medicinal effect was not as strong as the 7th-grade immortal pill given to Patriarch Yuan Hua, it was still very strong. Nourished by the immortal pill, Yu Miao's injuries were almost fully healed in no time. He glared angrily at Wu Qi and nearly coughed blood because of Wu Qi's sarcastic remark. Then, he threw his head back and roared furiously, "Fuck you." After that, the white tiger beast soul behind him abruptly transformed into a white torrent and rushed into his body through the top of his head. Unlike the last time, no armor appeared on Yu Miao's body. Instead, his body expanded abruptly, turning from 7 feet tall to 30 feet tall. His muscles were extremely muscular, and clear white tiger stripes could be seen under his dark and shiny skin. A tiger roar rang out, and a large amount of white tiger fur emerged from his body. Pointing his finger up into the sky, Yu Miao bellowed, "Once I get through this holy and fiend tribulation, I'll be able to break through the current bottleneck and step into the realm of gold immortals once I'm baptized by the immortal transformation spirit light. Then, I'll have a few more periods to live. Ha ha ha, calamity. Fortune. I don't want to die like this." With a loud roar, Yu Miao flew up 1,000 feet into the sky, staring arrogantly at the heavenly eye of thunder tribulation. Using the mystic eyes of universe, Wu Qi turned to look at the heavenly eye of thunder tribulation. There was a great amount of thunderbolts brewing in it. However, it seemed that because the number of people in the surroundings had suddenly decreased by several thousand, the thunderbolts only had the power for one strike. Although its power was the sum of the 2 thunderbolts, it seemed that Yu Miao had not hesitated to consume the soul power essence of his beast soul to activate another powerful divine ability. Therefore, there should be some hope for him to survive this heavenly tribulation. All of a sudden, the thunder tribulation came whistling down. This time, it was a black thunderbolt that could be seen with naked eyes. An ear-splitting ghost howl resounded through the void. This time, the thunder tribulation contained countless fiends and yin flames, and they came smashing toward Yu Miao in a messy manner. These fiends and yin flames were deadly to anyone, but with the protection of the divine flame of order, how could Wu Qi be afraid of them? As the thunderbolts came crashing down, Yu Miao raised both fists and threw them out with a hideous smile. 2 tiger-shaped energy streams flew out of his fists and smashed viciously onto the thunderbolts. The tiger-shaped energy streams were shattered, but more than half of the thunderbolts were dispersed. The disintegrating thunderbolts shot in all directions. The captains of formidable tiger army and the 2 immortal monarchs from the celestial court were howling miserably as they were enveloped by countless fiends and yin flames. Not long after that, they were completely devoured and turned into nothingness. Even their weapons and magical treasures were melted into a puddle of liquid by the yin flames. It made Wu Qi's eyelids twitch in anger. The remaining half of the thunderbolts fell straight onto Yu Miao's head, who was trembling violently. Yu Miao roared furiously, "If you can't kill me, I'll be able to break through the bottleneck, and fight against a gold immortal." Puff the newborn sword of greedy wolf lightly pierced out from between Yu Miao's brows. Then, Wu Qi pulled out the sword of greedy wolf from his back, and seized the opportunity when Yu Miao was distracted to deal a fatal blow to him. Casually, Wu Qi activated the devouring formation in the sword of greedy wolf, exerting all his strength to devour Yu Miao and the white tiger's soul into the sword. A miserable howl echoed out, as Yu Miao's fleshly body suddenly disintegrated into countless black ashes. The remaining black thunderbolts smashed heavily onto Wu Qi's body. Chapter 419. Bring it on. Wu Qi roared with laughter as the phoenix fire pouch rushed out from between his brows. A divine flame of order, as thick as a water tank and several tens of feet tall, burst into raging flames, burning fiercely and burning all the approaching fiends. Meanwhile, the Yin flames were swallowed by the phoenix fire pouch and turned into nourishment for the divine flame of order, making it even more dazzling, like a clump of purple and green crystals flowing within it. As expected, the heaven eye of thunder tribulation no longer shot out thunderbolts. As Yuzong died, the dark clouds and red light that filled the sky gradually dissipated. A pale golden cloud, which could make anyone feel comfortable just by looking at it, slowly descended from the sky and hovered above Wu Qi's head. It was the immortal transformation spirit cloud that would descend after every cultivator had attained the righteous fruit of heaven immortal and transcended the heaven immortal tribulation. The immortal transformation spirit light that descended from it could cleanse the cultivator's fleshly body, fuse their nascent divinity with their innate nascent embryo, and transform them into immortal souls. It could even slightly enhance the cultivator's cultivation base and the strength of his fleshly body. Originally, the 18 celestial fiend puppets were going to transcend an ordinary fiend immortal thunder tribulation. But, because of the disturbance caused by Yuzong and his companions, the holy fiend thunder tribulation descended, which was equivalent to the tribulation of a gold immortal. Therefore, the immortal transformation spirit cloud that descended was also of gold immortal grade. Wu Qi spread his arms, with the 18 celestial fiend puppets standing in a straight line behind him as they raised their heads to look at the immortal transformation spirit cloud in the sky. Countless jade-colored raindrops fell from the sky along with a series of pitter-pattering noise. They smelled fragrant and were as sticky as chalcedony. All of them had found their target, falling onto Wu Qi and the 18 celestial fiend puppets. Wu Qi felt streams of clear streams rushing into his body. Instinctively, he exercised the dragon transformation script and began to try to push the incantation of the 36 transformations of true dragon. His muscles trembled, and a powerful force began to vibrate from his fingertips, then his wrists, arms, elbows, shoulders, chest, and all the muscles of his body. Wu Qi lacked the innate yang energy at the moment, and in order to attain the perfect innate nascent divinity in one step, he did not want to improve his cultivation base. All of the jade-colored raindrops that he absorbed were used to refine his body and raise the level of his true dragon transformation. These jade-colored raindrops possessed unimaginable power. Each raindrop contained an enormous amount of power and was filled with vitality. Every drop of rain caused Wu Qi's body to cheer in joy. His body's toughness increased exponentially, and very soon, he broke through the bottleneck of the 3 transformations of the flood dragon and advanced to the 36 transformations of the true dragon. Wu Qi's body emitted a faint white light, and a pure but thin dragon qi slowly spread out from Wu Qi's body. On the other side, 18 celestial fiend puppets opened their mouths and let out deep, hoarse cries of joy that sounded like 2 metals rubbing against each other. Wisps of black smoke mixed with speckles of golden stars gushed out of their bodies, turning into mist and clouds that twisted around their heads and formed a black ring of clouds. Within the cloud, which measured 3 feet in diameter and was as wide as a palm, 12 shadows of fiends could be vaguely seen throwing their heads back and roaring furiously into the sky. Around these fiends was a ring of fine and complicated black runes. The dragon qi and fiend qi intertwined with each other, and Wu Qi absorbed them into his body. Suddenly, a clear stream of consciousness came from the puppets, and a cultivation technique of the Fiend League, the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, rushed into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. Wu Qi was taken aback. He was surprised to find that it was a mystic technique of the Fiend League that could lead him straight to the realm of Gold Immortal. Although he could only cultivate it to the realm of 6th tier Gold Immortal, it was still an extremely rare and precious mystic technique of the Fiend League. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi sealed off the meridians in both arms. Then, using the mystic technique of Scroll of Stealing, he split a part of his energy in his dantian, then quickly produced a Jin Dan according to the cultivation technique of the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture. After that, he split a thread of divine will and injected it into the Jin Dan, constantly fusing his energy with the Jin Dan, and quickly produced a new fake nascent soul. This fake nascent soul was cultivating the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture. Different from the other fake nascent souls, it had a pitch-black body, a pair of horns growing out of its head, and was treading on a sheet of blood-red light. Its entire body was shrouded in red flames, and vaguely, there were a few tiny fiends wheeling and dancing around it. After ordering the other fake nascent souls to sleep, Wu Qi used the Inferno Hell Fiend nascent soul to control all the energies in his main meridians. In just a blink of an eye, Wu Qi's entire body was shrouded in a dark mist, and there was also a ring of dark clouds forming behind his head. However, as the cultivation base of his Inferno Hell Fiend nascent soul was too weak, there were only 3 shadows of fiends in the dark clouds, roaring furiously into the sky, and only tens of black runes of the Fiend Tao could be seen hovering around them. They were not as wild and unbridled as the dark clouds behind the celestial fiend puppets' heads, and instead, they were filled with a mysterious and ferocious air. The jade-colored raindrops lasted for less than the time to finish a pot of tea before vanishing without a trace. After that, a wisp of fragrance came falling from the sky. Together with a colorful glow, the fragrant wind wheeled around Wu Qi and the 18 celestial fiend puppets. Abruptly, Wu Qi felt that his divine will had become more condensed, as if it had been compressed into mercury from running water. Inside the puppets, Wu Qi's clone inhaled the fragrant wind, and the connection between him and Wu Qi became clearer, allowing Wu Qi to control them more smoothly. There were still some rare ores hidden in the puppets' bodies that were not completely digested in the spatial tunnel. As soon as the fragrant wind swirled around them, their divine will was greatly enhanced, and the dark smoke in their bodies transformed into a sheet of fiend flame that wrapped around the pile of ores. The impurities turned into green smoke and drifted away, while the essence of the ores transformed into drops of colorful light and injected into the puppets' bodies. At the same time, these puppets assumed different postures and began to move according to the cultivation technique of Celestial Fiend Battle the Heaven script. The fragrant wind only lasted for a brief moment before vanishing completely. The golden cloud had descended, and when it was about 1 mile above Wu Qi's head, a sheet of gentle golden light sprinkled down slowly, along with a melodious heavenly melody. Wu Qi took a deep breath as the golden light rushed into his body. His innate nascent embryo moved abruptly, and his 10 nascent souls nearly disintegrated into nascent divinities on the spot. How could Wu Qi have the courage to touch this deadly immortal light again? The immortal light was used to help cultivators who had just transcended their thunder tribulation fuse their innate nascent embryo with their nascent divinities, turning them into nascent divinities. As Wu Qi did not have any nascent divinities to fuse with, it was his nascent souls that were melting. He was hoping to form the most perfect innate nascent divinity after he gathered all the innate yang energy. How could he be willing to be transformed into a nascent divinity here for no apparent reason? Without hesitation, he retracted his aura and produced the earth element dragon scale shield, isolating himself from the attack of the immortal transformation spirit light. Meanwhile, the 18 celestial fiend puppets soared into the sky while roaring joyfully, spreading their bodies and absorbing the immortal transformation spirit light to their heart's content. They had something similar to the innate nascent embryo in their bodies. Catalyzed by the immortal transformation spirit light, Wu Qi's divinity fused perfectly with the puppets, transforming into 18 blurry figures that kept twisting and turning, shrouded in blood-red flames. They were the souls of fiend immortals. Faintly discernible immortal pressure rushed out from their bodies. These celestial fiend puppets had truly stepped into the realm of heavenly fiends. The pressure emanating from them should be the fiend pressure of heavenly fiends. Compared to the immortal pressure of heaven immortals, the fiend pressure was much more bloody and domineering, and could cause severe damage to the nascent souls and nascent divinities of cultivators. The immortal pressure could only suppress the cultivators, but the fiend pressure had a direct lethality. Perhaps because they were transcending the fiend Saint Thunder Tribulation, which was equivalent to the Thunder Tribulation of a gold immortal, the immortal transformation spirit light sprinkled down was of a very high grade, and contained a very strong power of fortune. Under the illumination of the immortal transformation spirit light, the bodies of the 18 celestial fiend puppets gradually changed from the bizarre metallic texture to a state of half metal and half skin. Vaguely, they had taken on the appearance of humans, and no longer needed to use illusory techniques to transform into human shapes. Such celestial fiend puppets were much more flexible, and the strength of their bodies was much stronger than before. Even the cultivation base of the celestial fiend battle the heaven script showed a sign of breaking through the realm of 36th tier heavenly fiend. What surprised Wuqi was that the earth element dragon scale shield was absorbing the immortal transformation spirit light as well. Not only that, the item spirit Wuqi produced inside the shield was also going through a tremendous transformation because of the immortal transformation spirit light. The transformation was like a child born with low intelligence suddenly growing up into a learned scholar, or a green bean that had just been peeled and turned into a towering tree with luxuriant branches and leaves. Overjoyed, Wuqi quickly pulled out all his magical treasures, letting them bathe in the immortal transformation spirit light to his heart's content. All the magical treasures were letting out cheerful cries as if they were alive, especially the sword of greedy wolf, which had just devoured Yuzong's soul and the white tiger soul. It let out a shrill howl of a wolf, and with the help of the immortal transformation spirit light, it quickly transformed the soul energy of Yuzong and the white tiger's soul, fusing them into its own item spirit. Vaguely, Wuqi sensed that a huge, ferocious-looking wolf, pitch black in color and with a pair of wings on its back, was taking shape under the dual effects of the powerful soul energy and the immortal transformation spirit light. With the high grade of the white tiger's soul, perhaps the sword of greedy wolf could soon evolve into an immortal item, and the grade of its item spirit would be ridiculously high. On the contrary, the current form of the sword of greedy wolf had limited the power of its item spirit. Laughing joyfully, Wuqi happily looked at the several dozens of treasures around him, all of which were being purified by the immortal transformation spirit light. Especially the 5 acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements. Under the purification of the immortal transformation spirit light, they were absorbing the innate energies of 5 elements in Wuqi's body to their heart's content. Surprisingly, a crystal containing innate energy was formed in their core. Wuqi was both surprised and delighted. Could it be that these 5 acquired spirit pearls could really transform into innate items in a short period of time? In his great joy, Wuqi did not care about damaging his own energy. He squeezed out a drop of his prime blood essence and sprinkled it onto all the magical treasures that had been purified by the immortal transformation spirit light. Then, bearing the pain, he split out a thread of his divine sense and fused it into the core of these magical treasures. In less than the time to finish a pot of tea, the immortal transformation spirit cloud had completely vanished, and the spirit light sprinkling down from the sky had gradually dimmed. A faintly discernible but extremely clear divine will suddenly emerged in Wuqi's spiritual ocean. Option 1. Join the Celestial Court and become an immortal official of the Celestial Court. If you agree, an immortal light will immediately sprinkle down to welcome you to the immortal palace of the highest heavens. Option 2. Don't join the Celestial Court and remain an itinerant immortal. The next time you ascend to the immortal tier, you will still have the opportunity to receive an immortal light. Wuqi was stunned when he sensed the divine will that suddenly appeared in his spiritual ocean. So that's how it is. This is the true path to ascension. If you are willing to join the Celestial Court, when the immortal transformation spirit light sprinkles down, an immortal light from the Celestial Court will follow, and the newly ascended heaven immortal will be brought to the highest heavens to become an immortal official. If you are not willing to join the Celestial Court and be bound by the Celestial Court, you can do whatever you want. The Celestial Court will not waste its energy on you. Shaking his head and smiling inwardly, Wuqi stored all the magical treasures around him into his body with a satisfied expression. Off in the distance, countless beams of light were approaching him. The air was trembling, as a large number of cultivators and immortals were rushing towards him with teleportation. This was a dangerous place, and Wuqi dared not to stay any longer. With a blink of his body, he found the soul essence of a Pegasus in the chariot of 8 horses and fused it with his own body, then transformed into a beam of light and fled at top speed. But all of a sudden, the void next to him collapsed into a large hole, about 10 feet in circumference. An old, skinny, and shriveled hand that looked like a skeleton slowly reached out from the hole, slapping forcefully onto Wuqi's back. You dare to kill an important minister of Du? You deserve to die. Chapter 420. It was a casual slap, but it was no different from the weight of Mount Tai. Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield and Black Dragon Spirit Ring were activated with all their might. The golden light from the dragon scales formed a thick and heavy light barrier around Wuqi's body, while the black dragon scales formed a black armor on Wuqi's body. The lower-grade spirit item outfit given to him by Patriarch Yuan Hua moved at his will, transforming into wisps of smoke that rose into the sky and formed a cloud platform, blocking the skinny palm. The palm pressed down slowly, but even Wuqi, who had already activated the soul essence of one of the 8 steeds, could not avoid it. The golden light from the dragon scales scattered and disintegrated, while the black dragon scales turned into a plume of dark smoke and dissipated. Both the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield and Black Dragon Spirit Ring let out a miserable howl, and a large sheet of bright light burst out from both treasures at the same time. Then, the cloud platform transformed from the lower-grade spirit item, the green Taoist robe, was turned into nothingness, while Wuqi's clothes were torn into countless threads and scattered in all directions. The palm had slapped right onto Wuqi's back. Wuqi gave a muffled snort, and at the same time, 2 streams of blood shot out from both of his eyes. Suddenly, his body turned blurry, transforming into a dazzling beam of light that sped away into the distance. Even the few heaven immortals who were approaching at high speed from a distance did not manage to block his way. All they could see was a beam of light streaking across the sky and disappearing without a trace. The skinny palm slowly retracted, and the old, hoarse voice said, "Fortunately, you had a few decent items to protect you. Otherwise, I would have killed you on the spot. However, with your cultivation base, you will definitely die after suffering my Een deity palm." The one who will kill you is none other than Du, the left minister of Zhong province, Yu Miao. Riding on the soul essence of one of the 8 steeds, Wuqi rushed for several tens of thousands of miles, then immediately retracted all his energy and plunged into the ground. Exercising the innate earth element escape art, he transformed into a clump of earth energy and rushed forward along a few underground energy veins. All he cared about was performing hand incantation gestures and performing the earth element escape art. He was too lazy to see what was in front of him, and just kept rushing forward. Vaguely, he heard Yu Miao's voice. Du was the left minister of Zhong province, Yu Miao. Without a doubt, he was from the same clan as Yu Miao and Yu Mu, and he was an extremely formidable elder. The feeling he gave Wuqi was a few times stronger than that of Yu Miao. The strength of the palm was not strong, probably only a few 100,000 kilograms. Wuqi quickly formed a series of hand incantations and cast out the other 3 talismans. The surging death energy stopped, like a sticky filth, it stagnated in Wuqi's body. Wuqi cast out the talisman again and again, turning the death energy into his own energy essence. It was like walking on a tightrope, wandering on the edge of life and death. Once he couldn't keep up with the speed of transformation, once any of the talisman incantations went wrong, Wuqi would immediately lose control of the death energy and be devoured by it. One after another, the divine abilities and mystic techniques of ghost and deity flowed through his mind. Quickly, he analyzed the profoundness of these mystic techniques and found new runes from them, adding them to groups of talismans and injecting them into his body, controlling more aura of death. Gradually, the individual talismans turned into a set of talismans, then into a complete talisman, then into a small-scale talisman formation, and finally into a powerful talisman formation. He had been fleeing for half a month without sleeping or resting. With the speed of his escape art, he had already traveled tens of millions of miles. At last, his body trembled, and he regained his consciousness. 30% of the death energy in his body had been neutralized, and the other 70% had lost the crazy power to devour his energy, turning into a strange, sticky, half-corporeal energy, piling up inside his body. Because of the accumulated death energy, Wuqi's meridians were nearly blocked. His surging energy could no longer move, and was constantly being assimilated by the death energy. Helplessly, Wuqi had no choice but to use the technique of ghosts and deities he had just learned, condensing a fist-sized, complicated talisman formation inside his body. The technique of ghosts and deities was not used to cultivate the Jin Dan nascent soul, it was just a technique to control and use it. The more talismans one mastered, the stronger the talisman would be, the more talismans one mastered, the stronger the talisman formation would be, and the more talisman formations one mastered, the stronger the talisman formation would be. The grayish talisman formation was glowing with a faint white light, hovering between Wuqi's eyebrows, constantly extracting wisps of death energy and merging them into the talisman formation. Apart from his strong fleshly body, Wuqi's current cultivation base was only at the early stage of Jin Dan realm. Although he could still use the false nascent soul and innate nascent soul, as all his meridians were blocked, it would take a great deal of energy to cast an ordinary fire talisman. Therefore, Wuqi did not want to waste his energy to summon them. Before he fully comprehended all the techniques of ghosts and deities taught to him by Princess Xianglu, and absorbed and transformed all the death energy in his body, this was the only state he could maintain. After coughing out a few mouthfuls of blood, Wuqi rushed out of the ground weakly. With his head and face covered in dust, he emerged from a stream and staggered before falling to the ground. It was only now that the greatest danger of his body exploding was eliminated, Wuqi realized the extent of the damage to his fleshly body. It was about the same as Yu Miao, who had been struck twice by the thunder tribulation. 4 to 5 vertebrae near his back were broken, and a dozen ribs in front of his chest were broken. His internal organs had been devoured by the death energy, and had shrunk to a size. Now, he was suffering from a burning pain. His meridians, nerves, and blood vessels were all severely damaged, and a huge amount of death energy had accumulated in his body. Although it was no longer wreaking havoc, he felt like a turtle that had been trampled by hundreds of elephants. He did not even have the strength to move his fingers. Lying prone on the ground, Wuqi snorted and coughed a few mouthfuls of blood from time to time. It was the blood that his internal organs had turned into when they were attacked by the death energy. Wuqi sighed, feeling like weeping but having no tears. The world of cultivators was a dangerous place, and it was not a lie. De Yu was the left minister of Zhong province, Yu Miao. Wuqi clenched his teeth and kept the name in his mind. Just you wait, old man. When I'm fully healed, even if I can't kill you, I'll still take everything from your entire family. While Wuqi was gnashing his teeth, 2 feet wearing straw sandals suddenly appeared before his eyes. Wuqi was taken aback. With great difficulty, he raised his head and gave the pair of feet a glance. Straw sandals, bare feet, bare legs, and a short gray monk robe made of burlap. His upper body was bared, and a monk robe hung diagonally over his shoulder. On his back was a large wicker basket, from which a strong smell of herbs was wafting out. Placed on top of the basket was a large amount of firewood, which seemed to weigh about 50 kilograms. It was a young monk who looked to be in his early 20s. He had an ugly face, and his head was full of scars caused by abscesses. Even the scars on his face were covered. The monk put his palms together, bowed to Wuqi, and said, "Buddha is merciful. Almsgiver is in trouble, how can this little monk ignore it?" As the saying goes, saving a life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda. In the past few months, I've built a 21-storied pagoda, and I'm sure I'll be able to attain the Arhat karma in the future. Excellent, excellent. Without waiting for Wuqi to say anything, the monk grabbed Wuqi and held him before his chest. A faint cloud rushed out from under his feet, and with Wuqi in his arms, he flew along the stream and into the valley ahead. While flying, the monk asked curiously, "Benefactor, were you robbed of your money or your body? Why aren't you wearing anything on your body?" "Strange, you are a man. Could it be that you were robbed of your body?" Wuqi was at a loss. With great effort, he lowered his head and gave his naked body a glance, and he nearly fainted on the spot. Suddenly, Guru Guhi's voice rang out next to Wuqi's ears, as if he was still murmuring to himself like a haunting ghost. "Little fellow Taoist, there is a fate between you and the Buddhist League." Wu Qi almost let out a heart-wrenching howl. There is no fucking fate between me and the Buddhist League. Amidst the secluded green mountains and valleys in the distance, a corner of a small Buddhist temple was revealed. The leisurely ringing of a copper bell, the sound of a wooden fish, and the fragrance of sandalwood wafted into the air. The chanting of scriptures by the monks quietly rang in his ears. With Wu Qi in his arms, the monk flew straight into the small Buddhist temple, which occupied an area of about 2 acres. When Wu Qi entered the temple, he quickly glanced at it. There was a wooden plaque hanging on the door of the temple, and the words Heart Temple were carved on it. Chapter 421. The Temple of Hidden Heart was surrounded by a dense forest. Bodhi trees, so thick that it would take a few men to encircle their arms, could be seen everywhere in front of and behind the houses. Right in the center of the temple was a grand hall, measuring over 100 feet in both width and length. A few golden Buddha statues were worshipped in it, and a dozen little monks, ranging from 3 to 18 years old, were reciting a Buddhist scripture while being led by an old monk in his 60s. The old monk did not possess any Buddhist energy or cultivation base, but his body was shrouded in a Buddhist aura, and there was a faint ring of Buddhist light behind his head. Obviously, he was a man who had studied the Buddhist doctrine. As for the other young monks, a few of the younger ones had already fallen asleep on the cattail hassocks. As for the older ones, they were sitting cross-legged on the cattail hassocks, not making a sound. From time to time, they would sniff the fragrance of the big steamed buns coming from the kitchen in the backyard. The little monk carrying Wu Qi flew straight past the grand hall in the center, bypassing the back hall and the wing rooms in the double-layered courtyard, and finally came to the backyard. There were a few shabby cottages in the backyard. On the left side was a farmland of over 30 acres, where the half-yellow and half-green rice was growing nicely, and a few acres were planted with vegetables such as radishes and greens. On the right side was a kitchen, a woodshed, and a few stone huts built with large rocks. The aroma of a medicinal soup was wafting out from one of the stone huts. An old monk, standing about 8 feet tall and skinny like a bag of bones, was seen swaggering out from the kitchen with a bowl of gruel in his hand, feeding the few hunting dogs that were playing in front of the cottage. Upon seeing the old monk, the monk carrying Wu Qi cried out, "Master, your disciple has built another 7-storied pagoda. It's a pity that your disciple's magical power is too weak, and I could only build half of it. The remaining half will depend on you." The old monk turned his head over with a trembling body. A cold gleam flashed in his eyes as he gave Wu Qi a glance, then nodded slowly and said, Amitabha, Amitabha. Fellow Taoist, your injury is very serious. Have you been robbed of your money or your body? Why are you all naked? The old monk glanced at the black dragon spirit ring and spirit breeding ring hanging on Wu Qi's chest. Suddenly, he laughed and said, "Looks like you've been raped. But, fellow Taoist, you still have all your money and belongings." The words of the old monk and the young monk echoed each other. Wu Qi was so angry that he almost jumped up and smashed their bald heads. The little monk's cultivation level was only at the initial stage of the Jin Dan realm, and the old monk's cultivation level was only at the peak stage of the Jin Dan realm. Luckily, they were bold enough to bring a cultivator who was in trouble to their lair. Didn't they know that there was a saying in this world called, "The human heart is unpredictable"? Looking at the old monk's bright smile, Wu Qi coughed violently and said with a bitter smile, "Reverend, you must be joking." I only met a few enemies and was injured because I couldn't resist them. My clothes were also burned by them. May I know Master's name?" The old monk put down the bowl of porridge, clasped his palms together and said, "I'm Hidden Heart, and that is my unfilial disciple, Guarded Heart." While Wu Qi was about to hypocritically praise the Buddhist name of the pair of master and disciple, the door of a cottage next to them suddenly opened, and a hoarse and unpleasant voice was heard coming out of it, "Master, when can we leave this damned place? I can't stand the daily vegetables and carrots. I want to eat meat, I want wine, and I want women." Accompanied by the hoarse and unpleasant voice, Madman Shui, who had an ugly face and was clad in a coarse burlap robe, walked out from the cottage. He could not even walk steadily. Madman Shui was much skinnier than when Wu Qi first met him, so skinny that he was almost as skinny as Hidden Heart. Wu Qi had a feeling that Madman Shui was as skinny as those Rwandan refugees back on Earth. Apart from a pair of large, pale eyes and 2 rows of white teeth, there was nothing else on his face. Leaning on a rattan staff, Madman Shui walked out from the cottage while trembling. After complaining about the poor living conditions in Temple of Hidden Heart, he laughed joyfully and said, "Hee hee, let me see which unlucky fellow was saved by the monks here, just like us. Hee hee, we've been eating vegetables and carrots for half a year, but we haven't even seen any meat." Wu Qi stared blankly at Madman Shui. Madman Shui had just walked out from the cottage, and was rubbing his eyes hard because of the bright sunlight. When he saw Wu Qi, he was struck dumb as well. Both of them stared at each other for a long while, before Madman Shui suddenly cried out, "Master, bad news. Our enemies are here." A violent cough was heard, followed by hurried footsteps. Lao Ai, who was also skinny, but still burly and evil-looking, came running out from another cottage with large strides. Upon stepping out of the cottage, Lao Ai's body swayed, and he nearly fell to the ground. He stared fixedly at Wu Qi, pointing a trembling finger at Wu Qi as he cried out, "Are you really going to kill us? We, master and disciple, have been hiding here, and you still won't let us go?" Wu Qi touched his own cheek in astonishment. Helplessly, he realized that when he was traveling underground, in order to deal with the aura of death in his body, he could no longer maintain the magic of changing his appearance and body shape. Now, he was exposed to Lao Ai and Madman Shui with his original appearance. Laughing bitterly, Wu Qi shook his head with difficulty and said, "It's been a few years since we last met. How are you? You've really come a long way." Wu Qi admired Lao Ai and Madman Shui from the bottom of his heart. They had no idea what was going on in the outside world, and yet, they had come all the way to Panga continent from Myriad Immortals planet. On top of that, they seemed to have escaped from the tight encirclement after being severely wounded by someone. How could he not admire them? Sighing softly, Wu Qi nodded and said, "Panga continent is such a vast place, and yet we can still meet here. It seems we are fated." Lao Ai and Madman Shui were taken aback, then exchanged a glance. They could tell that Wu Qi did not mean them any harm. On top of that, Wu Qi was severely wounded, and could barely move his fingers. No matter how they looked at it, he did not look like he was here to hunt them down. After a moment of pondering, Lao Ai shook his head and said with a strange laugh, "You are not here to hunt us down. You, Wu Qi, are not qualified to hunt me down." Madman Shui gave a few cold laughs. He rubbed his knuckles and made them creak as he said, "Master, why don't we kill this fellow right here? He is the grandson-in-law of that bastard Yen Dan. That bastard Yen Dan was one of the people who heavily injured Master that day." Hidden Heart glared at him and gave Madman Shui a few heavy punches on the head. "How presumptuous!" he bellowed furiously. "This is a holy land of the Buddhist League. How can you fight and kill here? Since you know each other, and both of you have fled here after being severely wounded, it proves that you are fated with the Buddhist League. It is Buddha's will that you meet here and resolve the enmity between you. Whoever dares to talk about fighting and killing here will not even have vegetables to eat anymore." Madman Shui squeaked and shrieked as he hastily fled to Lao Ai's side, holding his head with both hands. While the old monk was about to teach Madman Shui a few more punches, the door of the kitchen next to him suddenly opened. A stout and muscular monk, who stood about 10 feet tall and had a waist circumference of at least 12 feet, came striding out from the kitchen with large strides. The monk had a basket of steamed buns in his left hand, and a pot of porridge mixed with vegetables and radishes in his right hand. "Dinner is ready. Dinner is ready. Bald donkeys, come and eat," he cried out. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Wu Qi, Lao Ai, and Madman Shui squatted on the foot-tall threshold of the temple's main entrance, each holding 2 steamed buns the size of a toddler's head in their left hand, and a bowl the size of an adult's face in their right hand. It was filled with vegetables, radishes, and porridge without any oil or salt. They were staring at the valley in front of them with a deep look in their eyes. Wu Qi took a bite of the steamed bun, which was as hard as a rock, and drank a mouthful of the porridge, which was bland and tasteless. He breathed out a long sigh and said, "Prince of Changxin and his disciple, have you been living with such a diet for half a year? You've been wronged, you've been wronged." Lao Ai and Madman Shui stared at the coarse food in their hands, feeling like weeping but having no tears. Slowly, they opened their mouths and took another bite of the steamed bun. "If not for the fact that I'm severely wounded and can't absorb natural energies to heal myself, and can only rely on these grains to replenish my strength, I would have long ago broken these bald heads, burned this temple down, and roasted all these bald donkeys." Lao Ai's body was shivering as he howled in a low voice, "Half a year, 189 days, and only one meal of this coarse food that not even pigs and dogs can eat. No wine, no meat, no beauties, nothing." Madman Shui complained in a low voice. "Only a group of old monks, big monks, and little monks, who have surrounded you all day long, telling you that you are fated with Buddhism, and asking you to shave your head and become a monk. Don't let me recover my divine abilities, or else. Wu Qi gave Lao Ai and his disciple a look, sighed faintly and said, "You can never forget the kindness of saving your lives. If you kill your savior, TSK, you will be haunted by inner demons, and will face a great obstacle in your future cultivation." Lao Ai nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. He glared at Wu Qi angrily, then spun and no longer bothered to look at him. Wu Qi did not pay any attention to Lao Ai, but went to find Madman Shui and asked him about what had happened to him and his disciple over the past few years. It was a very simple thing. On the day they killed Yu Hetian, after Lao Ai had digested the primordial yin energy seized from Yu Qianqian's body, the master and disciple slowly returned to Ji City. However, right after they returned to Ji City, Lao Ai was invited by Su Meier to study the divine ability of dual cultivation. Just when Lao Ai was in a desperate situation where he wished he was dead, Yan Dan led all the experts and sinecures of Great Yan Dynasty and launched a full-force attack, nearly turning Lao Ai into ashes on the spot. Fortunately, Lao Ai's will of delight was extremely powerful, allowing it to protect Madman Shui, who was also severely wounded, as they fled all the way out of Ji City. The master and his disciple fled in a panic, passing through Myriad Immortals Planet to White Cloud Planet, from there to Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, then Puyuo Heavenly Realm. After that, they evaded the pursuers, robbed cultivators and energy stones, and finally arrived at Panga Continent. By the time they arrived at Panga Continent, the master and his disciple were already riddled with wounds, on the brink of death. But their lustful desire did not die. Whenever they ran into a few beautiful female cultivators passing by, Lao Ai would immediately rush up to them, planning to rob them of a few cultivation vessels to heal their wounds. But heaven knew that the few beautiful female cultivators had a very strong background. Right after Lao Ai successfully abducted 2 gold core female cultivators, a 32nd tier heaven immortal came piercing through the void and nearly turned both Lao Ai and Madman Shui into ashes with one strike. The master and his disciple were lucky enough to escape. Although they still had the strength to struggle, when they were brought back to the Temple of Hidden Heart by the little monk, they were already on the verge of death, their bodies badly mutilated, and they looked no different from ordinary mortals. If not for that, with Lao Ai's nature, how could he stay in the temple and eat his cornbread obediently? Upon hearing Madman Shui's tearful complaint, Wu Qi was about to let out a few gloating laughs. But suddenly, a cloud flickered above the valley, from which came 7 to 8 handsome and beautiful young men. The leader of the group, a handsome man, casually threw a small storage bag to Wu Qi and said coldly, "This piece of land is now the territory of Anhe City's Min clan. There are 100 lower-grade energy stones in it. You have 15 minutes to move them out, or don't blame us for demolishing your shabby temple." With a blank expression, Wu Qi picked up the storage bag that fell before him. What was going on? Had he encountered Panga Continent's version of forced demolition? Chapter 422. Lao Ai was munching on a big bun and drinking a bowl of porridge, narrowing his eyes as he sized up the three enchanting and flirtatious girls. With Lao Ai's gaze, he could tell that these three women were no longer virgins. Not only that, but the corners of their eyes and the tips of their brows carried a romantic charm. It seemed that they had also cultivated some cultivation techniques that were fated with Lao Ai. However, in Lao Ai's opinion, the cultivation technique of these three girls was a little too shallow. The highest realm of dual cultivation technique was to be a Buddha on the outside and a devil on the inside. No matter how evil and overbearing the nature of the cultivation technique was, it had to look solemn and dignified on the outside. Only then could it truly reach the highest realm. Three little foxes, but they are not bad for healing. Lao Ai licked his lips and murmured in a low voice, "I'll take two, and you, my disciple." While munching on a big bun, Madman Shua lightly nudged Lao Ai with his elbow and said, "Master, with our current condition, we can't even kill a chicken. How can we have the strength to capture someone?" Lao Ai pondered for a brief moment, then both he and Madman Shua turned to look at Wu Qi at the same time. Carrying the storage bag, Wu Qi poured out a small pile of lower-grade energy stones. He counted them one by one, and sure enough, there were 100 pieces of lower-grade energy stones. However, they were too small. Although they could be considered as lower-grade energy stones in terms of quality, had anyone ever seen a lower-grade energy stone the size of a jujube pit? A standard lower-grade energy stone was the size of an adult's fist, and its volume, weight, and the amount of natural energy contained in it were measured to a certain standard. That was how a lower-grade energy stone could be considered as a lower-grade energy stone. The total of 100 pieces of lower-grade energy stones the size of a jujube pit was roughly the standard of one. Logically speaking, the storage bag should be worth some money as well, but had anyone ever seen a storage bag the size of a fist, and the space inside was only the size of a human head? What could be stored in this storage bag? If it were to be sold in the market, it would only be worth about 30 to 50 taels of silver. Laughing dryly, Wu Qi carefully picked up a lower-grade energy stone with his thumb and index finger, then smiled at the few men and women and said, "Fellow Taoists, seniors, senior immortals, is this a lower-grade energy stone? Wow, what an exquisite lower-grade energy stone. This is the first time in my life that I've seen a lower-grade energy stone that has been polished to such an exquisite level. It can be mounted on a ring as a gemstone." Wu Qi's words were very sarcastic, and the men and women were too dumb to hear the sarcasm in his words. The man who threw out the storage pouch arrogantly clasped his hands behind his back and coldly said, 100 low-grade spirit stones, not one less, of course, not one more. We, the Min clan of Anhui City, have acquired a piece of land that measures 300 miles in both width and length, and are going to build a garden to avoid the summer heat. This valley is now ours. Hefting the 100 lower-grade energy stones in his hand, Wu Qi grabbed a steamed bun and gave it 2 bites. After that, he rolled his eyes and cried out loudly, "Old monk Hidden Heart, someone is here to seize your territory. They want to rob the Temple of Hidden Heart with 100 low-grade energy stones, fuck them. Who dares to touch our Temple of Hidden Heart?" A loud roar that sounded like a muffled thunder rang out, followed by a series of footsteps that shook the earth and the mountains. The ground trembled slightly. The fat monk in the kitchen widened his eyes, picked up a guillotine that was used to cut grass, and rushed out of the mountain gate in a rage. Panting heavily, he stood at the entrance and bellowed furiously, "The Dharma protector of the Temple of Hidden Heart, Qi Tian, is here. Who dares to be so presumptuous?" Laughter that sounded like silver bells rang out from the mouths of the 3 women. Among them, the woman clad in a long green dress casually pointed her finger at the monk and said in a low voice, "What a strong monk. I wonder if he is just a spear that looks good but is actually useless." With just a flick of the finger, Qi Tian's waistband suddenly broke inch by inch, and his pants fell down to his feet. Immediately after that, several tens of large slits appeared on his monk robe as well. As a breeze blew over, his robe fluttered and fluttered, revealing his snow-white skin and flesh, which were as white as silver. He stood there in a daze, unable to move even a little bit. The 3 women burst out laughing, and the other 4 men followed suit. They were rocking back and forth with laughter, looking very pleased with themselves. The young man who threw the bag to Wu Qi narrowed his eyes, crooked his lips, and said to the woman clad in a green dress, "Little sister, your divine ability and magical power have improved again. Even I did not see how you did it." Meanwhile, the other 3 men hurriedly flattered the girl, making her magical power disappear. Wu Qi and Lao Ai exchanged a glance, then Wu Qi casually shoved the 100 low-grade energy stones into the storage bag hanging on his waist. A low-grade energy stone that was so exquisitely polished was indeed a rare and precious item. Even cultivators with a similar status would not be shameless enough to use it to deceive others. Judging from the Min clan of Anhui City, could it be that they were a clan of misers? Among these 7 men and women, apart from the man who led the group and the girl clad in a green dress, who had just formed their Jin Dan, the rest were still lingering in Xiantian realm. The cloud they stepped on when they came here was transformed from a magical item, and not a real cloud formed with their own overall strength. In the eyes of Wu Qi and Lao Ai, the girl's finger attack was nothing special, and there was nothing to make a fuss about. Qi Tian lowered his head and stared blankly at his fat belly. Suddenly, he let out a strange cry, threw away the guillotine, spun, and ran. Unfortunately, his legs were tied up by his pants, so when he turned and took a step forward, he fell heavily to the ground with a loud thud. Qi Tian's fleshy body rolled and shook violently, causing the main gate of Temple of Hidden Heart to shake violently. The wooden plaque hanging on top of the gate trembled, then suddenly fell off along with a large amount of dust, smashing right onto the back of Qi Tian's head. Ugh, ugh! Qi Tian fainted while foaming at the mouth. Wu Qi and Lao Ai exchanged a glance again, then brought Madman Shui and carefully retreated to the left side of the main gate under the statue of Guardian Vajra. With a bun in one hand and a bowl of porridge in the other, they began to stuff food into their stomachs. Lao Ai sighed under his breath and said, "We are in big trouble. My meridians are broken, and I can only rely on these mortal things to replenish my strength. Every day at noon, I absorb some essence of the sun and moon to heal my injuries and restore my energy. If these monks are driven away, where can I go to eat and drink for free?" Wu Qi craned his neck and swallowed a mouthful of bun. He gave Lao Ai a look and scolded under his breath, "Don't think you can eat and drink for free here. I was nearly killed by a palm strike, and my cultivation base is almost gone. TSK, this Min clan of Anhui City is not easy to deal with. I'm sure these monks will be driven away. You, master and disciple, will have to fend for yourselves." Wu Qi would not tell Lao Ai that he had 18 celestial fiend puppets of devil immortal realm, that he had cultivated the dragon transformation script to the level of 36 transformations of heavenly dragon, and that his fleshly body was strong enough to fight against an ordinary heaven immortal. Furthermore, he would not tell him that he had 10,000 long-bow men in his spirit breeding ring, who were on the verge of breaking through the nascent soul realm. Since he would not tell Lao Ai about these things, Wu Qi would definitely not tell him that he had a great number of spirit pills and medicines in his black dragon spirit ring. Ugh, why would he tell Lao Ai about these things? Unless Lao Ai swore to be Wu Qi's follower, why would Wu Qi help him? Buddha is merciful. Merciful. Benefactors, could it be that you have come to my Temple of Hidden Heart? Suddenly, a Buddhist chant rang out. With a big bun in his left hand and a bowl of porridge in his right, Guarding Heart walked out of the temple with his cheeks puffed up. He gave Qi Tian a surprised look, who was knocked unconscious on the ground by the wooden plaque, and his face darkened instantly. After placing the bowl of porridge and the bun on the threshold, the little monk came next to Qi Tian and grabbed the wooden plaque. A cloud soared out from under his feet, carrying him up to the lintel of the temple, where he hung the plaque up neatly. After retracting the cloud and landing on the ground, the little monk walked down the stone steps before the temple entrance, put his palms together, and bowed to the few men and women from Min clan. "Fellow Taoist greed, Could it be that what fellow Taoist said just now is true? Are you here to seize the foundation of my temple by force? A series of footsteps rang out from behind. Hidden Heart came swaggering out with a big bun in his hand, followed by a few plump and sturdy hunting dogs. The old monk looked at Chi Tian, who was lying naked and unconscious on the ground. He sighed faintly and said, "While meditating for the past few days, my heart was pounding with fear. I only knew that a calamity was coming, but I never expected it to be something like this." He gave the little monk a glare and murmured, "These benefactors are not pilgrims who come here to celebrate, but villains who come here to demolish my temple." Wu Qi fished out an exquisite lower-grade energy stone from his storage bag and tossed it in his hand. Laughing dryly, he said, "Old monk, this is 100 lower-grade energy stones they gave me. They want to demolish the temple and build a garden to avoid summer heat." Taking a deep breath, Hidden Heart looked at the 7 men and women and said in a deep voice, "Little benefactors, here is the title deed signed by the city lord of Anhe City. This valley, which is 10 miles in circumference, is the private property of Hidden Heart Temple. I've built this temple and have been meditating here for over 700 years. Every single blade of grass and every single tree is planted by me personally." The girl in a green dress gave a strange laugh. Twisting her slender waist, she stepped forward and said complacently, "Who wants to listen to your nagging, bald donkey? Old monk, how many years has it been since you left the mountain?" The current city lord of Anhe City is Reverend Sanle, the patriarch of Min clan. All the previous title deeds are invalid. Casually pointing her finger at Wu Qi, the girl tilted her head up and said complacently, 100 lower-grade energy stones are more than enough to buy your valley. You bald donkeys have taken the big prize, yet you are still not satisfied. You are just asking for trouble." Very cooperatively, Wu Qi took out the handful of 100 fine lower-grade energy stones and showed them to Hidden Heart. The old monk was struck dumb. Putting his palms together, he recited a Buddhist mantra and asked in a low voice, "May I ask how the former city lord, Grandmaster Jing'an, is doing now?" The young man who led the group tilted his head up proudly, took a few steps forward and said with a cold grin, "Naturally, that bald donkey has died on the spot. Bald donkey, you still have the time to finish a pot of tea left. If you don't move out now, don't blame us for being merciless." Wu Qi shoved the energy stones back into his storage bag, took a bite of the bun, and turned to look at Hidden Heart. The old monk's expression flickered slightly as he sighed and said, "I can't believe Grandmaster Jing'an has attained nirvana. What a ruthless method you have." The old monk placed the steamed bun in his hand neatly on the stairs behind him, then took a few swaying steps forward and said with a deep voice, "If that's the case, don't blame me for subduing the evil today and killing all of you evil creatures." A lion's roar burst out of the old monk's mouth. Suddenly, a large sheet of golden light burst out from under the skinny old monk's skin. He clenched his fist tightly and threw a punch towards the chest of the arrogant young man. Among the 7 men and women, the eyes of 3 men and 2 women rolled up, howling miserably as they were sent flying several hundred feet away, coughing blood and fainting to the ground. The young man and the green-clothed lady cried out in alarm, opening their mouths and shooting out a pinkish sword beam at the same time. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.